say your names just so I know and to test out the mics.
I'm Alexandra Smith.
Good.
CK. I'm Brandon Marks.
Good. Okay. Live stream good to go?
Well, we should be playing. Oh, one waiting? One waiting? Oh, there you go.
Okay, while you guys are setting up, I'll just start with the introduction. Hello to everyone watching in person and online. Thank you so much for being here. This is the first forum of the 2024 AMS Elections season. Woohoo. Today we'll have candidates for AMS President, VP Finance, Student Senator at Large, and the Student Legal Fund Society debating. If you don't know me, my name is Annabella McElroy. I'm the coordinating editor of the UBC, your campus newspaper, and will be moderating tonight's debate. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered today on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam peoples. Now, first things first, if you're all ready, I'll start by reading off the rules. Okay, so the rules for tonight are as follows. Each candidate will be given a 1-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. After the opener, we'll move on to moderator questions, so asked by me. You'll each receive 45 seconds to answer them. After all of you have given your initial response, you'll each get an additional 30 seconds to add comments or rebut what other candidates have said. During the additional response time, please raise your hand to indicate you want to speak. I'll call on you in the order that I've seen your hand raised. You can opt not to use your additional 30 seconds, but each candidate is only able to speak once during that additional response time. So you can't ask another candidate a question, just to keep things fair. Audience questions have been submitted through the AMS Instagram, or you can find, if you're in person and would like to submit an audience question, you can write it down on the papers in the back of the room. We'll pick them up by audience question time and use them. So again, as a reminder of the debates tonight, AMS President, VP Finance, Student Senator, and SLFS. I'll be aiming to ask around 3 audience questions, and you'll have 30 seconds to respond to those with no additional response time. As a reminder, candidates and volunteers cannot ask audience questions. Candidates, I'll be giving you all how much time you have before we start each question, so don't need to worry about remembering all of that. But please only start speaking once I've called on you. I will be giving you a 15-second and a 5-second warning, and please stop talking when your time is up. Failure to do so will result in me deducting time from your future answers, and you may be asked to leave the debate entirely if you do that consistently. Are there any questions about the rules?
Can you tell them how to use the mics, like to turn it off when they're not speaking?
Yes, so press the little button on the bottom of your mics. It seems like you all have that working. Please press it when you want to start speaking, and then press it again to turn it off when you're not speaking, just to avoid feedback and extra noise. Last thing before we get started, we will be live tweeting the debates at UBC News on Twitter. You can find recaps tomorrow on ubc.ca. And I believe we will have some jokes going on the @UBC Humor Twitter account as well. Okay, if we're all ready to go, we will start with opening statements. We'll just go from my left to right, so starting with Alexandra, you have 1 minute.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first debate. Very excited to be here, and I'm hoping that you all are able to get an idea of the candidates. But as far as I go, my name is Alexandra Smith, and I'm a new face to a lot of you, so I just want to take a minute to introduce myself. I have been a resident advisor on campus. I'm a B+MM student that is following the question, how ethically organizations should be distributing resources among migratory populations. And I also have a company where I teach people in the States how to compete in congressional debate. So suffice it to say, I think about ethics, community, and government a lot. And that's the reason why I'm here. I've paid attention to the AMS, and I have been wanting to get involved based off of all of my interactions with my residents over the last couple of years in order to advocate them and for what they need. My platforms could be running off of food, housing, community, and civil discourse. And I hope that through this conversation, you have a better understanding of who I am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. CK, go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is CK, and as you can probably guess, I'm running to be your next AMS president. I have served as president and 2-time vice president of the Engineering Undergraduate Society, where I managed a $500,000 budget and a team of over 400 volunteers, which I grew from 50, which is what it was at when I got involved. I have a lot of experience representing students to university advocacy stuff, and I'm really excited to bring that kind of engineering spirit and culture that we get to enjoy to the rest of campus and try to make us a more cohesive campus community full of more spirit. As your AMS president, I'll spearhead affordability initiatives, and I'll really focus in on food insecurity and financial aid. And something I'm really excited for is to create a UBC-wide exam database to catch UBC up to almost every other university on Earth. I can't stress this enough. We are one of the only universities on the planet that does not have an exam database that students can access no matter what as students at UBC. We had it until 1997. It was given to the AMS lost it. And as your AMS president, I'll make sure that it exists 2014 till the end of time. I'm excited to run, I'm excited to be your AMS president, and I'm excited to make campus better for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Brandon, go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Brandon Marks and I'm running to be your next AMS president. Accepting an 18-month unplanned vacation at the beginning of pandemic layoffs, I've worked for the AMS continuously since 2015 and currently serve as the Society's liquor purchaser. So in the past 2 years, I've been at the forefront of issues surrounding PC1 and PC2 and been part of the working group since its inception, representing both the Disabilities United Coalition and the Social Justice Center. Having worked here for so long, I feel it's important to say that I believe in what the AMS is capable of. My primary aim is to make the institution more transparent and to make sure everyone is given a voice. Last year, in the wake of issues surrounding gender-affirming care and PC1 and PC2 revisions, a lot of students feel that their voice was either not heard or outright ignored. It appears that student engagement is seen by the AMS as less of a resource and more of an obstacle, and as someone who values the concept of democracy, I don't think that that's the way that it should be. My ultimate goal is to make the AMS more responsive to the concerns of students and to make sure it actually fulfills its mission of improving the lives of students at UBC.
Thank you. Bulldozer, you have 1 minute.
Hello. Yes, I'm the bulldozer, and I'm also running for AMS president. And to me, essentially, I just want to say that it seems to me that the choice is essentially between two things at this moment. Number one, we have more of the same, an AMS that continues to let the student body down, that fails to actually solve a lot of the problems faced by our students, and an AMS that chooses a mechanical goal over extra funding for our struggling food bank, for example. And number two, we can also choose to have an AMS for the people, an AMS that actually listens, communicates, and properly represents the interests of the students of UBC. And now I'm here to try to be the change that I want to see. I'm here because AMS is supposed to work for us, all UBC students first, and I'm here because I want to push through my Open AMS initiative, which will increase transparency, improve consultation infrastructure, and more importantly, hold the AMS accountable to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. For future questions, if you just want to move slightly further away from the mic, that would be great. We'll move on to moderator questions. And for this first one, we'll start with CK and then go this way around. First question. The scope of the presidency is largely undefined, and if elected, you'll get a chance to shape it. Where would you put your focus, and how would you work with your vice presidents? Starting with CK, you have 45 seconds.
It's a great question. As the only one on this stage who has been a president working with vice presidents, something I really believe in is supporting your team. So each vice president will be elected based on a platform. My job as president is to support them and to support all the different clubs, constituencies, resource groups, and other campus groups on campus here. I want to bring people together. I want to make it more of a campus community. The biggest thing I will bring into my own office is definitely the academic database. We've done it before. It existed on this campus for almost 100 years, and I'm going to bring it back. I think that as president, you have the ability to direct the focus of the society, and I will direct it very singularly to improving the experience of students on campus, and more specifically to find tangible ways like funding, exam database, and other stuff like that.
Brandon, you have 45 seconds.
I think the Office of the Presidency is supposed to be the face of students at UBC. As the face of the student union, one particularly relevant way at the moment would be making sure that the genocide in Palestine is actually addressed by UBC rather than ignored. So in the course of the presidency, I think that the first thing I would do is amend code to make sure that APPs are selected based on merit and not hand-selected by vice presidents, and to make sure that it is kept democratic and that nobody chooses their own scion. And also making sure that there's increased cooperation with career staff so that things can actually get done.
Bulldozer, you have 45 seconds.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. The scope of the presidency is undefined, and if elected, you'll get a chance to shape it. Where would you put your focus, and how would you work with your vice presidents?
Thanks. Yeah, so essentially what I think is right now, there is a perception, I think, that the AMS Council definitely kind of stands on the top of some sort of a hierarchy at the top of the school. And I think the role of the president should be, oh, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, I think the role of the president should be not to kind of like be a council that is kind of unapproachable. It should be about speaking directly to the people and engaging in good faith with all relevant communities on our campus. And I think most importantly, if you want the EMS to be accountable, you have to have an executive and a council that's actually working for the people, and that's what I was trying to do.
Alexandra, you have 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. So as I mentioned previously, I have experience working in congressional debate, and one of the things that I have heard consistently from past presidents, as well as have noticed from the Robert's Rules of Order referendum, is that we don't feel as if the way the council is running, as well as different AMS subsidiaries, is being effective. So as someone who has personally read the 174-page guidebook of Robert's Rules and teaches it to 12-year-olds, this is something that I'm going to do from the get-go, have a conversation with counselors, teach them how to do effective legislation, effective referendums, and focus on the council first. After that, I'm going to be partnering with ResLife to work with housing and food. My experience there has led me to see some of the failings of the organization and has allowed me to have conversations and connections that will allow legitimate progress.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to additional response time. Would anyone like to use their 30 seconds? You can just raise your hand. Alexandra, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So we've already brought up the idea of referendums on Palestine by Brandon, and this is something that we're going to be talking about a lot over the course of this term. So I do just want to mention, the title of the referendum is not what was within the body of the referendum. When you're talking about food security, but then have nothing about food security in the actual body of the referendum, I think that we need to bring to attention the students that if you're just voting yes or no on the title alone, it's misleading to the student body. And this is something that I feel we need to address prior to the voting period beginning on March 1st.
Thank you, candidate. CK, your 30 seconds.
Yeah, sure. I think one other thing about the president's role is that you are often the only student in the room advocating towards university administrators, towards university faculty. I can say I'm the one on this stage. I've been in that room. I've been the only student in that room. I know how to fight for students. I know how to win for students. I think that's a critical part of the president's role. And if you don't have that experience, you should not be learning in the president's office. You should be going in with that experience and executing. The job of the president is not to learn. The job is to execute.
Anybody else? Not move on to the next question. Okay. The last 2 years have been marked by conflict between the AMS executives and the AMS resource groups. How would you approach repairing this relationship? We'll start with Brandon and go in the same order. You have 45 seconds.
I feel uniquely qualified to answer this question because I've represented 2 resource groups on the PC1 and PC2 working group. I think that the first step is to make sure that, as I said before, that student engagement is not seen as an obstacle, but is seen as a resource. When an AMS is looking for guidance, look to students and not to what is most convenient or expedient, because students know what they want. There's this myth that they don't, but we do, and it should not take 100 people showing up to a council meeting to make that obvious. It is so simple. Just listening to students and making sure that you're actually pursuing what they want and not what the executive has in mind.
Bulldozer, you have 45 seconds.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree that with Brandon that students should be seen as a very valuable resource and not sort of obstacle. And I will also say that as a part of my Open AMS initiative, I do have plans to number one, establish a 31 business days minimum consultation time for any sort of major policy revisions like bylaw changes for the council, and I'm also proposing that consultation with student bodies must involve full drafts of policies with full context provided so that we can actually make the AMS Council transparent to all the relevant student organizations and work with them in good faith. Thanks.
Alexandra, go ahead.
Thank you. So on the question of resource groups, I think that I have a unique perspective, as in I have been having all of my experience facing students, having conversations with them, and referring them to different AMS resources. So I've been on the referral end of things. I have seen and heard my students complaining to me and to other resident advisors about what's not working, where those pinch points are, and if I were to step into the president role, I would be on the opposite side of this, being able to resolve some of the issues that I have heard about time and time again. That would be my primary initiative, and as Brandon was mentioning, I'm going to be relying on the other staff members who have had more permanent positions in the AMS, who have more experience, and I'll be using my experience as a legislator and as a leader to make sure that those initiatives are actually being executed.
CK, go ahead.
Sure. I can say I'm the one on stage with experience actually mending broken relationships. When I took on my role as the US president, I made it a huge priority to mend our relationships with different groups on campus. Whether it was the Electrical Engineering Club, which was trying to actually secede from the US before I got involved, or the AMS, which obviously has had a very rocky relationship with the US over the years. I actually know how to repair a relationship. I know how to get there, work with people, meet them where they are, and actually figure out how to get things done. I've actually done that. I'll continue to do it, and I actually know how to do it instead of talk about it. Thank you.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
I would like to say that there is more than one candidate with experience in mending relationships. Part of being in the working group is seeking consensus and also seeking what is actually possible instead of just idealistic. And a lot of it is trying to make sure that solidarity includes forgiveness and trust, and trusting that the AMS is capable of being better. And trying to make sure that students understand that and that they do end up trusting us.
I saw CK's hand first, and then Bulldozer. 30 seconds.
Sure, yeah. I do think sitting on a working group that hasn't provided anything yet, like I'm hoping this relationship is mended, but nothing's actually happened yet. We're still in the drafting phase. I do want to clarify, I've actually done it. I've got results. I can point to things I've concretely done that have finished, and they're done. By the end of my term, the Electrical Engineering Club went from trying to secede from the EUS to inviting me to their grad night. I've actually done it. I've got the results. I'm not just talking about it. Thank you.
I just want to add that regarding experience or lack thereof, I do think that to be a good AMS president means to listen to the very diverse opinions of all communities and organizations on campus instead of just a selected few. And I do think that with my, let's say, outsider perspective, I'm also uniquely qualified to bring in fresh new perspectives and to engage with the students that normally are, not engaged in the our democratic process. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to the next question. What, in your view, is the point of the AMS's annual general meeting? And what steps, if any, would you take to get it to a quorum? We'll start with the Bulldozer. You have 45 seconds.
Could you repeat the question real quick?
Yeah, no worries. Could you just turn your mic off? What, in your view, is the point of the AMS's annual general meeting? And what steps, if any, would you take to get it to a quorum?
Yeah, I do think regarding the annual general meetings that one of the issues facing us today is that we don't have nearly enough engagement from the broad student body. And I think we shouldn't really be blaming students for lack of participation, but instead we should be finding ways where we can get more people engaged and get them into our democratic process. So essentially with a more open AMS, I think we're able to bring in more different voices and get more people engaged and make our AMS a lot more democratic and make these general meetings a lot more meaningful than they are right now. Thank you.
Alexandra, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So as I mentioned previously, ResLife. There is a first-year guaranteed housing, meaning that any first year who wants housing on campus gets it, and that is a fantastic opportunity for the AMS to speak to incoming students, catch them for school spirit, and hook them along for the rest of their year. When we have this AGM in October, that's the perfect opportunity to, first off, catch all of the resident advisors during advisor orientation in August, teach them about the different AMS resources, build that relationship through September, and by the time it's October, the first year students will know what the AGM is, they'll know all of the initiatives of the year, and the president as well as the executives will be able to propose their plan, be able to have integration of different students' ideas, and continue to work with them as they progress through their degrees.
I've got great news. When I got involved in the EUS, we hadn't held an AGM with quorum in over half a decade. I threw not one, but 2 consecutive AGMs with quorum. We didn't do it with prizes, we did it by showing students that we actually gave a shit about them. They came because they're invested in the society. By making people feel like they're a part of something, they come out to things. Not only did we get them out, they got a slice of pizza. They sit through 2 hours of me talking. Imagine how painful that is. You're listening to 45 seconds of it. Not just that, we passed the addition of an EUFBP external. That proposal, it failed 3 times. When I brought it to our AGM, not only did it pass, there were 9 no votes. 9. That was the kind of consensus we built by showing students that we believed in them and showing them that we were on our shit. Thank you.
Brendan, go ahead.
I think the purpose of the AGM is to show students that even on an individual level that they are valuable and that their opinions are worth listening to. Sitting in an AMS council meeting, you're watching other people vote, you can't do it yourself, but the annual general meeting is by design different from that. I think the way that I would increase engagement is by partnering with resource groups as well as larger clubs and possibly Greek Life to just make them aware of the purpose of the AGM, that it is for listening to students and for making things happen, and to make sure that what is ultimately steering the AMS is the students as individuals and not just the representatives of the AMS.
We'll move on to additional response times. CK, go ahead.
Thanks for the reminder, actually. Last year's AMS AGM also hit quorum. An initiative we introduced that I would bring back is the Interfaculty Cup. And something about that was that you got a small number of points per person you brought out to the AGM based on the number of people in your constituency, so it was fair to smaller ones as well. Because of that, we were able to blow past quorum in addition to the prizes offered, but we absolutely blew past it, and not just that, we engaged people where they were. So I would just do that again because it worked last year when I proposed it. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to use their additional response time? Yes.
I think that it's pretty clear that people are subject to momentum. If an object is in motion, it stays in motion. If they get out of bed, they'll keep moving. And when you have students who are going to try to be cashing in their 3rd and 4th years, it's really difficult to get them engaged in politics when they're looking at the door on their way out of their degree. When you are focusing on 1st years and integrating the AMS into the student experience as well as campus culture from the get-go, this will have a higher retention of involvement throughout their time at UBC and be more effective than just one-off initiatives.
Thank you, candidate. Anyone else? Great, move on to the next question. Oh, go ahead.
So, time and time again over the past 2 years, what I've seen is student concerns not being met and not being heard. Again, it should not take 100 people showing up to a council meeting to make them feel like their voice counts. So making sure that the AMS actually follows what students want, listens and engages with students to make them feel cared about and that they actually will be heard is what will motivate them to show up.
Move on to the next question. Reviews of the AMS's sexualized violence and workplace misconduct policy have been ongoing for years. What practically do you think needs to change about this process? And how will you approach these policies that none of you will have the chance to directly vote on? We'll start with Alexandra and then go right. You have 45 seconds.
Thank you. So this issue is one that's close to home. As an RA, and I know I keep leaning onto this, you have people who disclose to you, and you have to have those heavy conversations and follow up and continue to support them. And when you have different pieces like PC1 and PC2 that fail to continue to support students through the process of healing, continue to check in with them, to allow them to speak in a supportive environment, you're failing the student body as well as those who require this service in order to do well. So when we're looking at PC1, PC2, we're going to be consulting lawyers, we're going to be consulting therapists and experts because I don't have all of the answers, but I promise to look for them and to support students in achieving their health.
CK?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we won't have the chance.
Oh, sorry, could you just turn off your microphone? Thank you.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we won't have the chance to vote on them. But what we will have is a policy brought to and hopefully passed by council when I take office, if I'm elected president. What I'm excited to do is to work on making briefs to actually explain how those policies work. As a US president, like you said, you get disclosed to when you're in these positions. And I had to help a student navigate the complete labyrinth that is PC1 and PC2. Given that almost 100% of usages of PC1 and PC2 by students come through clubs or constituencies, I would make sure that the leaders of those organizations actually understand how those policies work and understand how to escalate. That's basically it. If you're survivor-centric, we're looking at ways for survivors to actually access the policies because right now it is completely confusing, and I would make ways to make it simpler. Thank you.
So as an actual survivor and previous victim of rape, these policies are very close to me. I have advocated on behalf of other staff members who are also affected by PC1 and PC2 and have been very, very frustrated with the way that people are completely ignored. And the AMS tends to run out the clock on investigations, waiting for people to either stop caring about their reports, or in the case of students, waiting for them to graduate so they don't actually have to be investigated. So part of the working group now is making sure that timetables are in place, that the policies are accessible, that survivor-centric language that was not included in the most recent revision is incorporated, and that the people who are continuing to inform the direction that these policies go are content experts and not only student representatives and lawyers.
Well, I would say that one of the things that actually got me into being like student politics in the first place was like seeing the PC1, PC2 process, and actually a large part of my Open AMS initiative has been influenced by what happened. So essentially, from what I understand, Brandon could correct me on this maybe, but from my understanding, like a lot of people were giving less than 24 hours time of consultation time, and for example, SAIC was only provided with like selected parts of the amendment. So essentially, with my Open AMS initiative, I will correct these issues. Thank you.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
This is less of a question, more of a comment, but Brandon, thank you for sharing experience. And I understand that when you're speaking on a public forum, it's like a deer in the headlights, and me too. And I hope that you have been able to come to some type of level of disassociation in the way that people need to in order to be able to speak without it and have it not hurt. So thank you for sharing your experiences, and thank you for advocating.
Thank you for that. My broad outlook on the universe in general is compassion and forgiveness. And the reason that I am kind is because I have experienced unkindness in the past. So I think that the way to approach these issues, including interacting with students, is showing them kindness and making sure that they trust you to make sure that these policies can move forward and are actually effective.
Move on to the next question. The AMS president is the face of the organization, and as such takes the most heat from students and other critics of what the executive is doing. How would you receive and respond to potential criticism? We'll start with CK.
Yeah, luckily I have been the face of an organization, if not two. Something I really believe in as president is you have to actually address things when they come up. I think a chronic failure of the AMS is to never actually explain why they do things or what it is they're even doing. I know even as a constituency president, as a counselor, I've been confused. So what I really would do is just honestly explain what we're doing and what the thought process is. I think that is one of the biggest issues with the AMS, is that there's not enough explaining why things are happening in detail. We need to trust students that when they're given information, they will actually look into it. And if they don't want to, that's their choice. But it's one of the biggest problems, I think. And that's, I think, what transparency is actually explaining your decision making and doing something about it.
Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah. The AMS president is the face of the organization, and as such takes the most heat from students. How would you receive and respond to potential criticism?
So I am unfortunately American, but the benefit of that is a vast appreciation for freedom of speech, including freedom to criticize. I was in hot water in my place of employment at the AMS earlier this year for speaking out and for criticizing deficiencies in PC1 and PC2, and was effectively silenced for that along with other staff. That is despicable and absolutely unacceptable. I understand that there is heat involved in being criticized. I am more than happy to take that on, because if somebody has criticism for me, that means there's room for me to improve, and it would be extremely disingenuous to shut that student down.
Yeah, I also think that critique is a very important part of any democracy, including our little campus democracy. And I also do think that people should be able to have the right to voice their opinions and conduct their activism and other sort of activities without having to fear for harassment, to have to fear for different kinds of threats. And I think as president of the AMS, I will not only listen to criticism from different communities and individuals, but also protect the right of everyone on our campus to be able to voice their criticisms and opinions freely. Thank you.
So I had an opportunity this summer to shadow the University of Amsterdam Economics Association student board. And more or less, they have this YouTubeable and Googleable, for all of you with a computer, organization called Room for Discussion, where you literally just bring people in and engage in civil discourse. It's debates, it's conversations, it's interviews. And these are the types of things that I feel the AMS is lacking. If elected, I would make a space for this type of civil discourse. I would either have a podcast where I talk to different individuals. You can look up me on YouTube for the different Congress videos I've made. They're terribly embarrassing and I apologize in advance, but they are for the 12-year-olds. So I want to create places for conversation to exist and want criticism to be something that's constructive.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
I think something that I would also try to initiate is an anonymous feedback channel for students, but as well as for staff specifically, to make sure that no one fears retribution for honest criticism, which is often very, very helpful. So making sure that people are protected and that no one is shouted down or intimidated in any way for genuinely bringing forth a concern and trying to make sure that the processes work best for everybody.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and I would also like to add that I think there should be a proper channel for people to report to the AMS, like the potential threats and harassment and pressures that they may be facing in their environment, especially with regards to our activist communities. So yeah, I do think it's very important to protect them and to let them have a voice and have a channel where they can be safe to discuss their concerns.
Yeah, something I always did when I was a US president was that I had an open door and open mini fridge policy. It was mostly pop, don't worry. I'm very excited to implement that again at the AMS. And something else that, again, I've talked about, it's on my platform on my website, is anonymous feedback surveys in collaboration with the AMS Operations Committee for the clubs and resource groups and with the President's Council for the constituencies to have anonymous feedback that actually goes out to all of our subsidiaries. It's something that I did in the US with the US department clubs. Went very well. We were able to address those concerns, and because it was submitted anonymously, there was no targeting. I'm excited to do that again.
I think that, as other candidates have mentioned, there is value to anonymity, but at the same time, when you have someone speaking to you anonymously, it's difficult to respond to them directly. So in the case of an anonymous feedback way or what method of speaking to the different students, I would want to ensure that we're focusing on the trends and the issues that are affecting students at large, rather than individuals with very specific concerns, because there is definitely a time and a place to manage those one-on-one, but perhaps that's something that can be delegated rather than dealt with individually by the president.
Move on to the next question. Everyone's used up their time. The next one we received as an audience question, but I wanted to ask it as well, so we'll keep it on the moderator question timing. The AMS and Interfraternity Council signed a memorandum of understanding this fall after the frats and sororities have been removed from the AMS in recent years. What do you think the AMS's relationship with Greek life should look like? We'll start with Brandon.
I think the first priority should be making sure that Greek life and students involved in Greek life still understand that AMS resources are available to them. I want to make sure, particularly for sororities, that they understand that peer support and SASC resources are there for them to use in the event of sexual assault. And also that the AMS, I personally think, has power to influence culture specifically surrounding sexual assault. And making sure that it has no place on campus, and that if it does happen when it shouldn't, that people will still be supported.
Yeah, I also think that I think what AMS can do within our current power is to bring about some kind of a cultural shift of a campus that's more protective of
survivors of sexual assault and health harassment. And I do think that there is definitely more that we can do in terms of advocacy to bring about change and to potentially bring in more safeguards and I won't say regulations because we can't regulate them, but there are definitely things that we can do in terms of advocacy to protect the people who are vulnerable.
So RAs go on rounds at 10 p.m. and then again at 1 a.m. and 100% of the people I have found laying on the ground in vomit have come back from the frats. And that's not any type of value statement about what it is that's going on. I understand this is a part of social life. This is what university students want to do to socialize, and I think that that has to be protected. But at the same time, we have to, as an AMS, come up with some way of implementing harm reduction, whether that is on the sexual assault side of things or on the different consumption of potentially harmful chemicals, drugs, etc. There are different resources that, as students, they're able to access. So at the beginning of the year, let's bring the frats in. Let's have a conversation with them about harm reduction and make sure that while they're conducting their business, they're doing it in a safe way.
I mean, conveniently, I co-authored that MOU. I took the draft that had been left for years, and I realized what we needed to do was make a standing relationship so we could have accountability, and we could actually work with the people who go to those parties and with the fraternities to make sure people get home safe. Since I got involved with SafeWalk, I got involved with removing some of the arbitrary restrictions, we got involved with advertising SafeWalk at fraternity parties. The number of students using SafeWalk in first term this year compared to first term last year is a 400% increase. I cannot stress that enough. That is 1,000 people that got home safe that did not get home safe last year. The way to work with these things is to find services and to work with Greek Life to actually make those services work for members of Greek Life and people at their events. Not just that, I've also met with both Panhellenic Council and IFC to promote other AMS resources, everything from AMS tutoring, SASC, everything like that. The goal is to make sure that their members are educated and that their members can use those services because those are over 1,000 students and we need to serve them just like we serve everyone else on this campus.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
I think it's also important to offer a pathway for reincorporating Greek life more inside the AMS after a period of, for lack of a better term, good behavior. And that pathway will also make those students involved in Greek life feel less alienated, knowing that they're back on the path to inclusion.
Okay. We'll move on to audience questions. I'm just condensing a couple of them so as a reminder, I'll ask each of you 30 seconds to answer these. Condensing a couple of the audience questions. Some UBC students want UBC to engage in financial divestment from companies complicit in human rights violations. In particular, one of the referenda this year calls on the AMS and UBC to divest from companies complicit in Palestinian human rights violation. What's your position on that advocacy? We'll start with Bulldozer and go around. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I do think that divestment is, a vitally important aspect of our future direction of our university as a whole. If we actually want to actually stand for things like justice and equality and human rights, like we proclaim ourselves to be. So yes, I'm supportive of divestment. I'm supportive of initiatives similar to that one. Thank you.
Alexandra? So on the question of divestment, yes, we have an ethical responsibility to make sure that the different companies that we are associated with are having some type of guidelines before we're engaging with them. But in the case of RBC and the different loan that we have to them, we have to remember that we're currently in a $738,000 deficit, that we have a negative 0.21% return quarterly on our investments, and that we have a fiduciary responsibility to mitigate financial stressors on our students. 50% of the student body says they're struggling with finances. Let's make sure we're prioritizing them as well.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest question is, does the AMS's stance about BDS change what UBC does? As someone who was around last year on council, I actually remember when the AMS adopted a BDS stance and went straight to the board and swung, and the board laughed at us and nothing happened. I think if we need to figure out what we're actually doing, I think that the AMS's current stance is not a stance I would ever rescind. But I think that if we're looking to do advocacy, just going up and saying that we believe in this, we believe in that, with absolutely no plan, no goal, and no history of advocacy experience, will get us absolutely nowhere.
while I agree that the AMS does not have a whole bunch of power to control what the university does, we do have the power to control what we do. So we, despite having a little over 1% in organizations like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics that are tied to anti-Palestinian groups, it is completely possible to move away from that, just like we moved away from fossil fuels. So I absolutely believe that that's possible. I think it's a realistic goal. It would be a priority for me.
Okay. No additional responses to audience questions. So we'll move on to the last audience question and then closing statements. Simple one, what experience will you be bringing to the AMS that will make you an effective president? We will start with Alexandra, and go left.
So I'm a person who is hungry for research, legislation, cooperation, and public discourse. And I understand that from the get-go, you have to set the tone with your council for the way in which this year is going to run. And I'm going to be hard on them. I'm going to make sure that they are showing up, they're doing their responsibility, and that they're advocating on behalf of their students as well as speaking to them. With the communication from ResLife, we're also going to have input of the 14,000 students through the resident advisors, and a point of being able to figure out how they're doing mentally, financially, emotionally, and using that resource with a pragmatic approach is something that we cannot understate.
It's too bad there isn't more time. I've been the president of the engineering and undergraduate side. I've been a club room manager. I've been a vice president of the EUS twice. I've been in as many positions as one person can possibly hold. I've been in as many different ways of interacting with the AMS as you can. I've been on the receiving end. I've been handling things of the constituency relations this year. I know what it's like to interact with the AMS and wait 3 months for an email reply. I've actually been a leader. I've actually chaired a council meeting. I've actually been on AMS council. I've actually done all the things that the AMS president is expected to not just do, but manage and run. I've had direct reports. I've managed a ginormous budget. I've actually done this stuff before. You can't learn that on the job. Thanks.
Having been here since 2015, one thing that I've learned is that obstacles to progress are not often with counselors or executives, but often with the permanent staff at the AMS. So over the past 9 years, I've developed working relationships and I'm on a first name basis with most of the high level staff at the AMS, and have relationships with them that would allow for open conversation and making sure that goals are actually made possible rather than just discussed at council, and making sure that pragmatic goals are slated and are eventually made possible or made true.
Oh, as you probably would have guessed, I don't have a lot of relevant experience regarding the AMS. But what experience I do have is, number one, I have been deeply involved with my local writing association for the NDP in the past. And I do think that I can bring more of the, to advocate for democratic participation and to use my own experience in our wonderful democratic process as a kind of like, anyways.
Thank you, everyone. With that, we will move on to closing statements. You will have 1 minute. We'll start with Brandon.
Thank you very much for having me here this evening. It's really an honor to be able to run for AMS president. I just want to reiterate that over the past 9 years, I really, really do believe in what the AMS is capable of, and I want to see it achieve it. I want to see the institution care about students. I want to see the institution care about staff. I want to see it care. And I believe that I can make that possible. And I really look forward to working with other people to make that goal a reality. And thank you very much for trusting me with your vote.
Thank you. Bulldozer?
Well, it's I'm one of the most unlikely people to be sitting here, and I feel really lucky to be here. And as you know, I started out my experience here as an international student at very first, and English is not my first language. But I think I started this campaign kind of as a joke and to bring out more people to vote. I do think that's still a part of it. I think right now AMS turnout has always been low. And I do think that this campaign shouldn't just be about the 22% of people who do vote. It's about the 78% of people who don't. It's about people who are disillusioned, people who are tapped out of the AMS, And the majority of students, like me in the past, who are simply too busy for school, work, and their life in general to pay any attention to our politics whatsoever. So by bringing in an open AMS initiative, by bringing in transparency, and by bringing in as many people into our conversation as possible, I do hope to bring about some positive change here. Thank you.
So by my measure, campus culture is a shell of what it was pre-pandemic. And I think that we need to keep in mind the price of living is exacerbating any of the issues that our students are facing. You have the age of AI where we're not sure what economic job market we're going to be walking into. Our students don't feel like they are prepared when they're leaving university. They're not financially prepared to be here for 4 years, and they need help from the AMS. We're the student union. We're supposed to be working on behalf of the students. And by having a clear legislative directive, as well as a culture and underlying ethic of care, transparency, and public discourse, that's something I believe I am capable of bringing to the AMS. I want you to consider whether or not you want, as the bulldozer said, more of the same or something different. And by voting for me, you're voting for a student-focused, resident AMS experience where you're seeing the different results of civil discourse and a focus pragmatically on housing, food, and community. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure, I hope I've been able to show you guys here. I have real goals, I have real experience, and I have a real track record of actually fighting for students and actually winning for students. I'm the only one running for president that's been elected to represent students, full stop, let alone almost 6,000 of them, let alone 3 separate times. What I'm really excited to do is to add a 0 to that number and represent the 60,000 students on this campus. I'm excited for all the support. It's going to be a great 2 weeks, and I'm really excited to see what we can all get done. Thanks so much for coming, everybody, today. And I guess I'm the last one, so thanks to the UBC, thanks for the Elections Committee for putting this together. And I'll see you guys all Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates and everyone in the audience, and also for bearing with me. This is the first debate I've ever moderated. We are ending a little early for this first debate, but we'll be back at 5 o'clock with the VP Finance. You can see the President's debate again on Thursday, I believe at 7, back here. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and as a reminder, if you have any audience questions, you can write them on the paper in the back.
Oh, did you? All right, I'll look it. I'll look at it.
Finance and stuff like that. No, it's a student senate.
Make sure no one steals my stuff. I'll be back in a sec.
You get 2 people as a farm marching discussion. I'll be right back. Talk to you. Nice one.
Spencer?
I'll try to sit up.
I've got it. I got that in the online question as well, so it'll be after this. Great job. That was really good. I love the.
Everyone agrees? Yeah.
No, the live stream is really good. Do you know the live stream is really good?
The live stream is unmuted.
Oh, wait. Oh, no. Once I write that down.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, okay. Oh,
I'll let you stay for this. I'll go get our cups of. I don't know if there's extra, but do you want a coffee?
Oh yeah, that's like one of like yeah.
Okay, hi candidates. If you're ready to go, do you just want to test the microphones? Let me know your name. Yeah.
My name is Gavin. Mike's working pretty well. My name is Walter.
Great. You may need to press and hold to turn it off. Yeah, just make sure that they're not both on at the same time. They turn it off once you stop talking. Hello again, everybody, and to the live stream. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the VP Finance Debate. My name is Annabella McElroy. I'm the coordinating editor of the UBC, and I'll be moderating this one, as I will all of them. A reminder of the rules for tonight. Each candidate will be given a 1-minute opening and a 1-minute closing statement. I'll be asking moderator questions, which you'll each receive 45 seconds to answer. Once you've both given your initial response, you'll each get an additional 30 seconds to add comments or rebut what the other candidate said. During the additional response time, just raise your hand to indicate you want to speak, and I'll call on you. You can opt not to use your 30 seconds, but you'll only be able to use it once and cannot ask another candidate the question with that response time out of fairness. Audience questions can be submitted through the AMS Instagram or through paper in the back of the room. If I don't get to them today, we'll ask them at the Great Debate, but I'll try to ask a couple today, which you'll get 30 seconds to respond to with no additional response time. As a reminder, candidates on any campaign and volunteers cannot ask audience questions. Please only start speaking once I've called on you, candidates. I'll let you know how long you have to respond, give you a 15-second and a 5-second warning. Please stop talking when your time is up. Failure to do so will result in time being deducted from future answers, and you may be asked to leave the debate entirely if you continue to speak over time. Any questions about the rules? Good? Okay. As a reminder, we're live tweeting the debates at UBC News on Twitter, and we will be publishing recaps tomorrow on ubc.ca. We will get started then with opening statements. Gavin, you have 1 minute.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming out to the AMS VP Finance Candidate Debate. My name is Gavin Fongquan, and I'm running to be your next AMS VP Finance. I bring a depth of knowledge and experience to this position, having worked in the AMS Finance Office for 2 years, working as the current Associate Vice President Funds, where I work with students and intake for particular funds, grants, and subsidies. I formerly worked as the Financial Systems Administrator, working with financial systems, and then moving on to Associate Vice President Finance, where I work directly with clubs and constituency treasurers to make sure the budgeting was in line. I'm also a treasurer for a AMS club, Hong Kong Students Association. And moving forward, my platform really is to strengthen services, make sure that student subsidies are properly allocated, and simplifying club finances. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mokum Singh Malik, and I stand before you today as a candidate for VP Finance. Now, I want to start by painting a picture of our current financial landscape. It's a landscape marred by staggering losses, one where every single business in the nest except one bleeds money. It's a landscape where executives rake in pay while students struggle to make ends meet. Now, throughout my years of advocacy from City Hall to the legislature, I've fought for fiscal responsibility, for youth representation, and for sustainable development. And now I'm bringing that same passion to the AMS. My candidacy isn't about waiting for change, it's about making change from day one. We'll cut waste, we'll review failing businesses, and we'll prioritize student supports right out of the gate. Today, we stand at a crossroads. We can either choose to continue down a path of deficits and complacency, or we can forge a new path, one of financial responsibility, one that supports students, and one where we have thriving businesses. Together, we can build a better future for all students at UBC. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to questions. We'll have 45 seconds to respond. First question. The AMS is projecting an over $700,000 deficit this year. What, if anything, do you think can be done differently to practically address the persistent deficit? We'll start with Mokum.
Thank you. Well, I think the first thing I want to do is I think we should be cutting executive pay by 10%. Right now, executives make $42,000 a year, so cutting that would save us roughly $80,000 a year. I also think that we can cut back on the amount of support staff or paid support staff that executives receive. That would save us upwards of $200,000. Right? That there are actionable steps that we can make to cut waste and to ensure that students get the best services. Because when we're spending all this money and it takes 2-3 months to get a response from the AMS, well then let's hire more volunteers and let's cut paid staff. Thank you.
Hi. Honestly, when it comes to the deficit, really what we have to look at is not just basically cutting what we have, because over the past year we've cut any bloat, and really we have to look to revenue streams within the AMS. So looking to our businesses moving forward, it really means that our plans have to be secure when it comes to talking with the managers and any plans that go move forward with council. So when we look at late conferences and catering, we have a very successful team, and if we push that moving forward and expand that, we can actually make more money to put back in the pockets of students.
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
So on top of that, really it's just like, I'd like to address my opponent's point here in saying that we need to have volunteer staff. Unfortunately, in the finance office in particular, we can't actually have volunteers of that nature because of due to the confidentiality, as well as we have a unit as well that would breach certain labor laws as well.
With that, we'll move on to the next question. Eggs at the AMS Food Bank are currently sponsored by an external company. Do you see sponsorships as a sustainable funding method in the AMS? If so, where do you think the AMS could go for more? We'll start with Gavin.
Certainly. When it comes to funding from external sponsorships, obviously the hard work for the VP Academic and University Affairs to work with the university to get more funding is one of the options, however that's only short term. Clearly we have to work with nonprofits in the area, whether it's looking at the resources that Greater Vancouver Food Bank has in procurement, but for sponsorships wise, it's really moving forward to actually connect with community groups, whether it's student groups on campus that also hold drives or sponsorship events. We really have to look forward to every single part of the community to get in touch with.
I would say that sponsorships are not sustainable because we don't know when they're going to come, if they're going to come. As to looking for further sponsorships, right now the university is negotiating with Save On Foods to try to get student discounts there, and that may drag on forever, right? So us engaging in our own negotiations with grocers, also working with philanthropic groups on campus and partnering with them. I'm proud to say I've gone many times to the Six Students Association's Von Shuckle program, where we give out free meals every Tuesday, right? Hot meals. And so working with those on-campus philanthropic groups to ensure that we as students are supporting each other.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Move on to the next question. Combining mine with an audience question here. One referendum this year calls on the AMS to stop receiving funds from RBC and working with the bank because of its investments into fossil fuels. Whether or not this referendum is to pass, how would you approach the AMS's relationship with RBC as VP Finance? We'll start with Mokum.
Well, I think that one, we have the building loan, right? And that's not something that we're going to be getting rid of anytime soon, right? But we can engage one in consultations with community groups, with constituency groups to say, well, where do you want to bank, right? What represents your values? What represents, your mission? And if, RBC doesn't do that, and if you're super against RBC, well then maybe we can look into alternative banking options for you in particular, right? It's about, at least saying to them, we're going to try something, we're going to hear you, and we're going to listen. Not, we're going to dismiss your concerns right out of the gate and we're going to do nothing. Let's at least say, we're going to try, because we hear you and we want you to be heard.
Yeah, Yeah, when it comes to RBC and our relationship, it was good pointing out that we have our loan with them on an operational level. Unfortunately, we actually made contact with other credit unions around the region, and the fact is there's around like 400 clubs and 20 constituencies, resource groups, not to mention our vendors and suppliers that we have to work with. And unfortunately, pretty much everybody outside of RBC can't actually sustain that type of business that we do, and it's really unfortunate, but we will look forward to different opportunities if the options are clear and actually work for us.
Either of you like to use additional response time? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. The health and dental plan had a significant fee raise this year, but it still wasn't enough to cover $1,500 in mental health treatment without extra money from UBC. How do you think the AMS should balance high coverage versus funding stability for the health and dental plan? We'll start with Gavin.
So my approach really is that it requires consultation from the student body because this is their health plan. And as we've seen through referendums, current and past, is that students want more of their health plan, but unfortunately as costs continue to rise and we can't continue to keep pushing more fee increases, but we can reallocate from what students actually want out of their health plan, whether it's shifting certain from dental over to mental health, whether it's shifting over vice versa. Either way, it's really consulting with every student group on campus, especially when it comes to healthcare, because that's so important for everybody.
Now, I just want to say that mental health care is really important. Now, I've lost peers who couldn't get that support, right? And when we talk about mental health care, we have to realize that this is healthcare, right? It is as important as dental care. It is as important as everything else, right? So we have to talk with the students. We have to say, well, what do you want? What is your top priority? And then we will have to work from there, right? Because we don't have unlimited money, right? We can't keep squeezing pennies out of students. So we have to say, we're going to work with you and we're going to see what is it that you want and what is it that you need and how can we best accommodate that with the resources that we have.
Anyone like to use additional response time? Next question. The AMS pushed fee opt-outs this year as an affordability measure, but some fee-receiving groups, like the Bike Kitchen, felt the campaign didn't promote the services they provide enough. Would you run this campaign similarly next year? We'll start with Mokum.
No, I would not. I mean, I met with the permanent staff at the Bike Kitchen. I talked with them. I think, the Bike Kitchen is one of the essential services that we have at UBC. And I think that the fact that we pushed the opt-out so rigorously to save students, $1, $2, $3, does not make up for the fact that we could potentially lose these important services here at the AMS. I mean, not only that, but when we push on the resource groups, we say, oh, well, everyone opt out of the resource group fees. Well, in our constitution, it says that unless there's a 2/3 majority of council, resource groups have to receive at least the same amount of money they received last year. So in fact, if we push the opt-outs too hard, what happens is our deficit increases because we have to pay that money as council rather than that as students. So instead of saying to students, hey, you guys get to save 30 cents to $1, we're gonna say, hey, let's actually work to have these essential services on campus.
For me personally, it's really adjusting how we approach any opt-outs because ultimately we're giving the democratic process back to the students. It's the reason why students were able to get those fees through is through having an opt-out option. But it's really important that we actually include, whether it's Bike Kitchen, resource groups, campus culture and performance, whoever it might be, into the conversation. And honestly, if we look at the numbers, it's really showing what students actually want to put their fees into and actually making sure that students get what they want out of the AMS fees.
Either of you like to use additional response time? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I would just like to correct a statement from Mokum's that the code that requires payment out from the resource groups, that's not actually correct. The actual statement is actually based on the percentage actually collected rather than previous years, because due to previous years changing fee intake, that would not actually be a feasible measure because it does not exist.
to the next question. The AMS has not had perfectly accurate budget projections over the past couple of years. In particular, the deficit has been overestimated, but executive office spending has been underestimated. How do you think budget projections could improve? We'll start with Gavin.
So really when it comes down to it, we look at staff and making sure that from the start, we calculate every single thing to the T, exactly to the T, where it's being spent. Because currently speaking, it's like some differentiating factors and variation were due to changes in benefits being not actually as they were. And moving forward, it's really just like being on top of every executive to make sure they stay in line with their spending, and also make sure to use the funds that are inside the AMS to their maximum potential that they have to apply to, rather than just eating into the deficit.
I think we have to make it clear to the executives that these are hard boundaries, right? I mean, when my paycheck comes in, right, I don't say, oh, well, I overestimated and I ended up spending more than I should have, right? No. So we have to go and we have to say to the executives, these are hard boundaries. Let's try to, estimate lower than that, and then you can have a little leeway, right? But don't go and spend more of the student money than you've been allocated, because at the end of the day, this is the money that is, the students, right? And we are the stewards of that money to bring benefits to the students and to the members of our student union, right? So we have to set these hard goals to ensure that we are not wasting money and that we are instead allocating as efficiently as possible.
Anyone like to use additional response time? Okay. Then we'll move on to an audience question. As a reminder, you will have 30 seconds to answer these. An audience member asked about your position on the solidarity referenda, in particular calling on the AMS and UBC to boycott, divest, and sanction companies complicit in Palestinian human rights violations. We'll start with Mokum.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think is important is we at the AMS should publish the investments that we currently hold right now. And I think that we need to set that as an example for UBC. I think that when we talk about ESG, that's something that is really important to me, and I know that that's something that's really important to a lot of students, because at the end of the day, we are paying fees to the university, we are paying fees to the AMS, and we don't want those fees to go to things that we can't morally support.
Yeah, as far as the AMS and investments that would be, I guess, part of BDS motions, is that in 2 years ago, BDS motions did pass. We make sure that we'll make sure we're ethically investing in things, and we look to that and also feel like free funds. And as far as the university, it's really to count on president as well as count on every member of the executive, especially the president's lead, to make sure we're moving forward in a way that's productive for students and the AMS.
I think with the time we have left, so I want to leave a bit of a break for Senate. For today, we'll move on to closing statements. You both have 1 minute for these. We'll start with Gavin.
Hi, thank you again for having me at this debate. It's great to see everybody come out and engaging in student politics. For me personally, I'm here to fight for you. I've worked hard in the AMS office. I've put my whole life in AMS clubs. And honestly, when it comes to financial decision making, I want to put money back in the pockets of students, maintaining financial stability, and actually putting the money where it matters. So I hope you can count on me for your vote. And if you want more about my platform and any more details about my experience, go to votegavin.ca. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Friends, the AMS is losing over $700,000 this year. Every business in the nest, save one, operates at a loss. These aren't just numbers on a balance sheet, but it's squandering resources that could be used to support vital student services. We deserve leaders who prioritize student welfare over their own personal gain. Leaders who understand that fiscal responsibility isn't just a buzzword, but it's a commitment to the community's welfare. I've been fighting for years for change at all levels of government, from City Hall to the legislature, and now I'm here to fight for you. My platform isn't about distant 1 days. It's about action from day one. We will cut waste, we'll review failing businesses, and we'll prioritize student supports immediately. We face a choice: more deficits, more waste, more hardship, or a future of fiscal responsibility, support for student services, and thriving businesses. Visit mocum.ca to learn more, and starting March 1st, vote MOCUM for VP Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. That's the end of our VP Finance debate for today. You can catch them both again on Thursday at the Great Debate. And now we will leave 10 minutes until our Senate debate. As a general housekeeping note, again, you can ask audience questions at the back of the room. Please leave the pens on the table for everyone's use. Thanks in advance. Okay, welcome to the Senate debate. First things first, candidates, if we could go from left to right. If there's no more room on the front table, if you just want to take one of the two seats on the side here in the front row, you're welcome to. If we could just, starting on this side of the room, just let me know your name and so that you can test the mic, make sure it works. Please only have one mic on at a time to avoid feedback.
My name's Solomon E. Kieran.
Jasper Loran.
Sahib Malik.
Camille Kanji.
Kareem Hasib.
Alex Chu.
I'm Tasha Fache.
Kyle Rogers.
Sorry, sitting next to Jasper, could you remind me of your name?
Sahib Malik.
Okay, thank you. And sitting next to Alex, could you also remind me?
My name's Tasha Bell.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just many candidates on. Many candidates
No,
running.
it's just the
Making sure I
at-large
get
ones. I meant to
everyone's
say
name down
that.
right,
Yeah.
in the right order.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming to the Senate debate. Again, first forum of debates of this year's AMS Elections season. My name's Annabella McElroy. I'm the coordinating editor of the UBC, and I will be moderating. Rules for tonight, just a reminder, each of you will be given a 1-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. You'll each get 45 seconds to answer my moderator questions, and after you've all given your initial response, you will each receive 30 seconds to add comments or rebut what other candidates have said. During that additional response time, please raise your hand to indicate you want to speak. I'll call on you in the order your hand is raised. You can opt not to use the additional 30 seconds, but each candidate will only be able to speak once during that additional response time. You cannot ask another candidate a question with this additional response time to keep things fair. Audience questions can be submitted on the AMS Instagram or a paper in the back of the room. Candidates will have 30 seconds to respond to audience questions with no additional response time. As a reminder, if you're a candidate or a volunteer on any campaign, do not ask an audience question. Candidates, please only speak when I have called on you. I'll let you know how long you have to respond, and we'll give you a 15-second and a 5-second warning. If you do not stop speaking when your time is up, I will be deducting time from your future questions, and you may be asked to leave the debate entirely if you continue to speak over time. Any questions about the rules? Great, okay. As a reminder, we're live tweeting at UBC News on Twitter, and you can check out debate recaps tomorrow on ubc.ca. I'll also plug we'll have fact-checking articles going up later this week, fact-checking all of the candidates' claims at the debates and on their platforms. Okay, with that, we will start with opening statements. We'll just go Solomon and then all the way down this way. We'll go in that same direction this whole time. You have 1 minute.
Hello, my name is Solomon E. Kieran. Thank you all for everyone who came out to watch tonight. I'm honored to be running for Senate and to advocate for you. I've devoted my time to student leadership and advocacy since high school, where I advocated for queer visibility, reconciliation, and environmental justice as Pride Club leader. I've also worked with the NDP to advance progressive goals for youth and the LGBTQ community in the party's youth wing and government and council. Most recently, I've served as a AUS first-year rep, where I've worked to build community in and advocate for first years, with merch, events, and eventually policy recommendations to the Faculty of Arts. In Senate, I want to push for more accessibility by mandating recorded lectures and improving the LR7 accessibility policy. I'll also focus on academic supports. I want UBC to offer more scholarships, cap textbook prices, and have an open exam database and a 24-hour library. Lastly, I'll push for more Indigenous courses and for students to be able to self-advocate and self-report pronouns on campus. A vote for Solomon is a vote for somebody you want to advocate for you in Senate. Thank you.
Thank you. Jasper, go ahead.
Hey besties, I'm Jasper, I use they them pronouns. UBC needs ethical partnerships. This is through a systematic policy to disallow academic partnerships with universities complicit in human rights abuses. This also should be a partnership, or should end partnerships with fossil fuel companies that are funding research that harms the planet. We need to ensure that students can pay for course materials, not just through OERs, but also through required lab equipment and supplies being provided by the school. And we really, really need more accessible learning. I have a 10-point plan for this, and none of this is something that I just made up as a platform point. It is all based on the work I've previously done through organizing with Clan Justice UBC, Studies United Collective, through Pride, and also through work I've done with the AUS Equity Inclusion Department, and 5 years of experience in governance outside of UBC. I've worked closely with the AMS, senators, CFA leadership, and UBC executives to begin making these changes. I'm excited to continue working on this along the Senate.
Thank you. Solomon, go ahead.
My name is Saif Malik, and I'm thrilled to announce that I'm running to be a candidate for Student at Large Representative for UBC Senate and the representative for the Arts Undergraduate Society. I'm running a platform of mainly commuter students on the challenges we face as commuter students. I want to basically mandate that all courses that they're going to require recorded lectures and live streaming of lectures. So just in case of any events such as Snowmageddon of 2022, any traffic, things that we can't control as commuter students, that we have access to lectures that we can't miss. Another thing that I want to point out is the cost of textbooks. You know, getting those costs down so we can all afford to pay for university. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry for mixing up your name. Kamal, go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Camille. I'll try to not wrap up this for the UBC so you guys can catch what I say. I'm running for re-election to continue serving as one of your student senators at large. This year, within my various roles in the Senate, I've successfully created the priorities of the Student Senate Caucus for the next 3 years, titled Senate 2026, developed guidelines for allowing the use of AI like ChatGPT in courses, started the review of academic policies related to exam hardships, secured $250,000 for open education resources, and so much more. This year I hope to continue so much of the good work that has been started, like continuing the implementation of lecture capture technology in all courses, developing policy to cap textbook costs, and making sure that we are implementing the STEER framework, inclusion plan, and so much more. I hope you take the opportunity to check out more about who I am and my platform at votecamille.com, and remember to vote starting this Friday.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Kareem Haseeb and I'm running for re-election to the Senate to continue my advocacy for increased accessibility, accountability, and equity, so all students have equal opportunities regardless of their socioeconomic background. As co-chair of the Student Senate Caucus this past year, I've had the privilege of strategizing and assigning committees for fellow student senators, and I want to work towards the goals that our caucus has drafted this year in Senate 2026. Some of my key policies include implementing 24/7 library access, affordable textbook policies in tandem with an increase in open educational resources, increased media engagement, implementing the ISP, and a more holistic appeals process that recognizes systemic barriers and biases. I'm also someone that sees that existing policies that govern academic life at UBC need to be revised to reflect our values. Policy LR7 should be revised so that diagnosis isn't necessary for students to receive accommodation. Policy V102 should be revised so that you don't have to take 2 exams back to back, and Policy V103 should be revised to make sure that, to enforce that instructors can schedule exams in the last 2 weeks before finals. If what I'm saying resonates with you at all, I would be honored to continue serving you as one of your student senators at large. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Chu. I'm a second-year science student in the combined majors in science specialization. One of the main reasons why I'm running for election to be one of your senators at large is because I know here in science a lot of people have frequent questions and uncertainties regarding academic policy. I wanted to run to make sure it's more transparent. I think especially with exam conflicts, like some of my other fellow candidates have mentioned, is a big issue. And also along the lines of mandatory and sometimes those prerequisite courses, I want to see if there's any way we can make that more fluid so we allow first and second years a better chance to explore what they want, to find their true passion. I really hope that all of you will consider voting for me starting this Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Tashifa, pronounced she and her. I've worked as a research assistant, an organizer, a sustainability ambassador, and an affordable housing advocate with the federal government. But most importantly, I am a student. There are two things that I intend to do as a senator: decolonize academic curriculum and advocate for syllabus during course registration. There is a need to bring decolonial efforts in Indigenous learning not only as separate courses, but into mainstream academics. And secondly, according to the 2023 Academic Experience Survey, 82% of the students indicated that having a past syllabi at the time of registration would help them better choose courses. And they're absolutely right. So why don't we? In my conversation with various faculty members, 4 departments, and surveying over 300 students, I identified that there is currently no centralized data collection from UBC for course registration, and that updating syllabus is often left until the last minute. But through my solutions, I believe that we can change that. Thank you.
My name is Kyle Rogers, and I am vying for the position of Senator at Large. Some of my background includes being an executive of a club on campus, volunteering with the BC NDP, in addition to serving on Minister Brenda Bailey's Electoral District Association. I've even had previous student government experience at my time at UBC Okanagan's campus. My candidacy revolves around one crucial concept, which is respecting your time. And as students, our days are precious, our days and time are precious, and it's imperative that it helps us grow. Firstly, I'm advocating for an earlier December exam break. We should not have exams at December 22nd at 7 p.m. We should also have 24-hour library access, a full fall reading break, and more online classes. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We'll move on to questions. First up, students at large don't know what the Senate does or what student senators do. Does that matter? And if so, practically, how would you change it? We'll start with Jasper.
Yeah, so a lot of students don't know exactly what the Senate does, but students do know what they need. They need accessible learning, they need to be able to pay to go to school, and they need to be able to feel comfortable going to an institution that's doing ethical things. I would like the students to know everything the Senate does, but it's not easy for people to access it. There's a lot of documents, there's a lot of pages. I would, on Senate, communicate as much as I can about the internal processes, but I think the thing that's most important is that I help students get what they want done, whether or not they know exactly how it's being done. Thank you.
I think it's important that students do know what Senate is doing and what Senate is. What I would propose is opening up Senate meetings to students and also faculty, because they have a say in it as well. Also, posting meeting minutes a lot earlier rather than, a month or two later, like publish it a week and a half later. Another thing that I would also say is we can publish those meeting minutes and have like UBC articles towards Senate and what Senate does and what Senate can do for the students and what for you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course it matters. I think what's important to note is that continued work and collaborations with the UBC, the AMS communication channels, as well as the UBC communication channels to continue some of that communication work that we've started. But what is equally important is making sure that the work is actually getting done. And I have a track record at the Senate of making sure that happens, whether that is related to initiating the reviews for the academic, for the exam hardships policy, or the use of the formal examination period policy to make sure that we are being conscious of student needs and concerns, whether that's starting the work in keeping ITB open 24/7 during the final exam period, whether that's developing guidelines for the use of AI like ChatGPT in courses, whether that's securing funding for open education resources, or whether that is simply the continued advocacy and priority of students and all the work and all the conversations that we have. I've proven that I can deliver, and I'll continue to do that.
Yeah, so of course transparency matters and engagement matters. This year transparency has been one of my key action items actually. I've co-authored all of the Senate Recentered articles that have been put out this past year through the UBC opinion section, and I've posted Senate updates on my personal Instagram, my personal Twitter account, and on r/UBC on Reddit. And I've also started the process within the Senate caucus of creating a committee specifically for communications. So it's something that's incredibly important. I really want, one of my action items in my platform this year is rebooting the Student Senate Caucus website, which has not been updated for the past 2 years. And that website is where we can have a central hub of information from this caucus to students. So I think that there's a lot more work that can be done. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, of course, students understanding what Senate is and what it does is very, very important. But I think the reason why there's often people kind of don't really understand what happens is because it's very wordy and complicated. So yes, I myself have read some of the Senate Recentered, those articles. I think they do a very good job at simplifying and breaking down those issues. I think sometimes even the minutes are kind of hard to follow around, especially when it mentions a bunch of numbers and a bunch of initiatives that might seem uninvolved and not connected. So if elected to the Senate, I will also try my best to contribute to make things more simple and accessible.
I mean, yes, of course, it matters that students know what their highest academic decision-making body does and what the senators do, but if you ever try to read the policies, I mean, they will put you to bed. But, well, that's the challenge, right? You need to meet students where they're at and put these conversations in social media and informal forums, but then, again, the challenge remains about proper interpretation of the policies and making sure we're not spreading misinformation. That's why having a separate dedicated committee that manages the social media and it manages the communication is really important.
Could you turn off your microphone? Thanks.
Yeah, so student government is something that I believe in, and with any form of government, holding, I guess in this case, the senators accountable is important, and for students, voters, being communicated with on what's happening in that transparency is very important. And I know when I looked into running for student government a couple months ago, even I didn't fully understand what was happening with the Senate, what the Senate exactly does. And you know, I'm a political science student, so yeah, I feel like there's definitely been a lack of communication on what the Senate does, and we can definitely work on progress on that.
Yeah, so I believe that when it comes to communicating with students, Instagram is one of the best tools that we can have, and basically everyone's on it. And in my role as AUS first year rep, I use my own Instagram, SolemnXYK, please check it out, to hold myself accountable and reach out to students. I think Senate needs to be doing the same. Senate has an Instagram, there's just 0.0 followers, and it's completely private. So we should be making sure that we have good social media that is clearly communicating to students, in addition to a revamped website, in addition to Senate Recentered, in addition to all of these other committees we have. Thank you.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think what Elspeth said is incredibly important. You know, if you try to read out policies, they'll put you to sleep. And I think that's why my office, I'm also Vice President Academic of the AMS, engaged in creating digestible versions of all relevant academic policies for students that is available on the AMS website to make sure students have access to information. I think that is a vital part of what we do. Additionally, a lot of the barriers we face are institutional, ensuring that in the external review, which will complete very soon within the Senate, making sure that transparency and making sure we're making the Senate as effective as possible is at the forefront of a lot of that work.
Anybody else? I'll move on to the next question. Should the Senate be more proactive in making university-wide policies on AI and academic misconduct, or should that be left up to individual professors? If you think the Senate should be more proactive, how? We'll start with Sahib.
I think it's incredibly important that Senate comes out with a university-wide policy, especially for AI. If it's not with individual professors, you can have certain professors saying, if I catch a hint of AI in any of your papers or assignments, I'm going to fail you entirely. And then some professors saying, I want you to use AI, I want you to use it as a learning tool. So if what we need is a university-wide policy, so every professor, every student is on the same playing field. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important that there's direction provided from the university. You know, in my role, I've also had the opportunity to serve as co-chair of of the Generative Artificial Intelligence Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee, which is responsible for exactly that, developing guidelines that will help to teach professors as well as students on sort of the permissible forms and usage of AI in the classrooms. We worked very hard to make sure ChatGPT was embraced and then AI was embraced generally, and making sure that we're not taking a punitive approach, but rather more of an integrative and collaborative approach. Additionally, we made sure that the AI detection function feature on Turnitin is not enabled. So currently, everybody here, if you are using AI, it's not available, it's not detectable on Turnitin, which of course, has its own resources, but what we've seen is that AI detection tools are actually not as efficient as we think currently, and until we're able to get to a point where they are, we shouldn't be using them.
Yeah, I echo many of those same comments. I think that when you leave things, when you keep passing the puck on to lower levels of institutional government, especially when you bring it down, not even to the faculty level, but to departments or the professors themselves, there's a lack of consistency and students get confused on exactly what they're allowed to use and what they're not allowed to use. I do think that there should be institution-wide policy, and I think it's important that we embrace generative AI and not be Luddites when it comes to the topic. I think that when used properly in the right context, it can be like having a second brain, and it can improve the quality of people's academic work in research and in learning exponentially. So I think it's really important that the university create comprehensive policy on this topic.
Alex.
Thank you. Yes, I kind of agree with what Camille and Kareem have said. I believe that AI is relatively a new thing. I believe we shouldn't be looking at it totally in the scope of black and white. There's still a lot of unknowns about it. I agree that there should be a general policy. I don't believe at this point it should be as comprehensive as some other candidates have kind of suggested, because I also believe it differs on coursework. There are some courses where the AI is genuinely used as kind of a memorization or like a flashcard tool, and there are other courses where an AI could potentially be used for more substantial types of work. So while I believe that there should be general directions and like a very clear overarching policy, I think there's still things we need to sort out.
Yeah, I partially agree with my opponents. I think at the moment we need a department-oriented approach because the usage of AI differs from subject to subject, and that would probably take place as a pilot, and professors are allowed to kind of use their own judgment about how they want to let AI being used in their classes. Because right now, since it's a relatively new technology, we do not have enough information on the scope of its usage to create a comprehensive framework around how we want the students to use it and what's going to be considered as plagiarism. So the key would be to embrace and learn the scope of its use among students and then take action from there on.
So AI is a tool, and it's not going away. Some profs, as some have mentioned, are entirely against AI. Some are pro-AI. I know I had a prof who has required AI in one of our assignments. So I think it is important that the Senate creates some policy with regards to proper use of AI. I don't think banning it is useful nor practical. It's very easy to mask. But it's also a good tool for creating outlines, things like that can help guide students kind of in the right direction if they're stuck. I think we should look at other universities and institutions who have maybe created similar policies with regards to AI and see if that can be incorporated at UBC.
Yeah, I agree with my fellow candidates that AI is definitely a useful tool and not something that professors or classes should be shunning. I also do think that, yes, there needs to be unified policy on it so that students know what to expect, and Senate needs to be taking a role in that. But at the same time, Senate's role should also be to advise the faculties, because art students, Eng students, science students, they have different requirements, different ways that they need to use AI in their courses. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we do need a comprehensive policy on AI, but it needs to recognize the difference between faculties. And also, I recognize that comprehensive policies take time. And in the interim, we need stopgap measures, and we also need to make sure that students understand what recourse they have right now when they do get accused of using AI. We need them to understand that they have access to the Ombuds Office for Students, they have access to the appeals process, making sure that while that the policy is being developed, they know what they can do before it gets finished, because these things do take a lot of time.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so glad people brought up this sort of department-based approach, because that's exactly what these guidelines do that we've been working on for the better part of half a year. They provide sort of guidance for faculty in a way that is individualized and specific to department and faculty, yet still broad enough to apply largely to the university. They're very complex, involved a lot of consultation, and it'll be going out for another round of broader consultation from a number of students as well as faculty once more. And I think in the interim, it's important that we have these guidelines in place to provide direction, and as we work towards the development of a policy that is cognizant of faculty association requirements as well as the best interest of students.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Jasper brought up academic misconduct, because we're seeing an influx of cases where students are being accused of academic misconduct on the basis of usage of AI. And that's why in my own policy platform, I extensively talk about the two appeals committees, especially appeals on academic discipline. Because when students are disciplined, we tend to have a very blind approach to just seeing if the faculty followed the proper procedure. But what I'm pushing for is to make sure that on the appeals committees, there's anti-bias training and procedural training to make sure that all the senators on the two appeals committees understand what's happening.
Tashima, go ahead.
So one of the approaches that I suggest is having an AI disclaimer, especially for research and essay-based courses, where students write the scope of their usage of AI, which is for copywriting or suggesting prompts and frameworks, and then we can use this data while crafting policies, and this is going to help us better understand how students actually use AI and so what's going to be considered as plagiarism and misconduct and what's not.
Go ahead.
In addition to what Karima said about training for appeals, I think in addition to the anti-bias and procedural training, it's also really important that the people reviewing appeals are trained in understanding that there are systemic disadvantages that some students may be facing, and understanding how to work that into the review appeals, and so that they can better advocate for students. Thank you.
With that, I'll move on to the next question. How do you think student experience of instruction surveys, so the end of semester surveys, should change or not to inform instructors in an equitable way? I'm sorry, I'm just going to say that one again. How do you think student experience of instruction surveys should change or not to better and equitably inform instructors? We'll start with Kamal.
Yeah, I think SEIs are a great tool for for professors to actually understand what students are experiencing in their courses. And if people don't know, SEIs are actually considered in tenure processes, and when faculty is up for tenure, it's something that is considered pretty heavily. I think that in terms of not changing, it should continue as the way it is. But I think what's important is that in the evaluation piece, a lot of faculty are saying that we shouldn't include SEIs anymore. And in order to address that, having a level of sensitive analysis software that's able to help categorize student feelings and opinions and thoughts, so that they're able to be a little bit more digestible for faculty, but and filter out some of the more not constructive comments, really.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think with SEIs, for one, I'm pushing for a midterm SEI feedback. So, before finals, before the most important parts of your assessment, halfway through your term, there's a mini survey just so the professors can fix their teaching style potentially for the rest of the term. I also think that, like Emil said, sentiment analysis is really important to make sure the professors are using welcoming and acceptable demeanor in the classroom or in the lecture hall. But I also think that when it comes to the way that professors are promoted or given tenureship, we do need to review that, because study after study have come out saying that when professors are white and when professors are men, students tend to rate them much higher in evaluation surveys, and that can disproportionately affect women and people of color and gender diverse people when they're being put up for promotion.
Alex, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what Kareem said is so important. Usually these SEIs are at the very end, and while I'm assuming there will be changes kind of implemented based on the feedback, it's a little too late for the people that have already taken it. And if there are measures or practices that right now are unfair, that won't be addressed before, like how Kareem said, before the biggest part of your assessment, your final. So I think it's really important that students are able to share their feedback, how the course is, before they're kind of graded on the majority of it. So that when they kind of respond at the end, if there has been a change, then it's indicative of the policy and the responses actually taking effect. Thank you.
I've just gotten some feedback from your mic. If you want to just be a little further away from it for future answers, that'd be great. Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, so for those of you who do not know, I'm also running for VP Academic, and one of the key goals on my platform is to initiate a anonymous mid-session check-in for professors to better adapt to their current students and not just the next batch of students. And what this is going to do is it's going to help both the learning and teaching styles to be better adapted, the expectations to be managed both by the professor and for the students. And this has to be done before the mid-exams, and to make sure that we get actual, crucial, important feedback from the students and not just the ones who are petty because their midterm went bad. And the second thing I would want is for the emails to be controlled about how we're promoting the survey. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so as for the SEIs, I feel like me and many other students don't really do them unless the professor is so amazing or so awful to their experience. And so I feel like there's definitely some extreme bias on either end. I do agree with some other candidates on the midterm survey. I feel like that would be a good idea. Because it does feel pointless writing them when we don't see any not consequences, but any changes to the surveys. It does take a lot of time to write them in a way that would be useful. So yeah.
Solomon, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely agree with my fellow candidates that a lot of times these surveys aren't really being responded to by students, and they're getting pretty biased results. So one of the ways to go about that is definitely to have the midterm surveys. That way students can see a direct impact on their own education. But also, I think it's important that we're giving incentives for students to want to do these surveys, because otherwise they're just annoyed that it's flooding their inboxes. If we had giveaways or just reasons for students to actually want to fill these out and take the time out of their day, that would be a really useful way to make sure this good tool is being used to its fullest effect.
Yeah, so the thing with them is that no one fills them out, right? Like, I have filled out a couple, and again, as it was said earlier, it's for things that are either really good or really bad about professors and learning. And I agree with Solomon and some other people that we need to incentivize them to be filled out to get better data. But I also think we need to recognize that it's not just instructors and their syllabi that affect learning, it's the accommodations you got, it's the systematic disadvantage you have. There's a lot of things that affect the quality of learning, and it cannot just be seen as professors and their teaching in a vacuum, and that's really important to recognize within them as well.
So I agree with a lot of my fellow candidates here that we need a midterm SEI survey, because I know in certain classes where students have gotten a really bad mark on their midterm or their final, and they're just writing bad reviews about a professor. And it's also on the other end, even if you have a really good professor, there's no real incentive to write a good SCI review. And even if you're doing it, you're just gonna fill out the bare minimum. And like for some class, professors even giving out bonus participation marks for students who can fill out those SCI surveys. And a lot of them are just doing the bare minimum. They're just saying 5, 5, 5, 0, 0. They're not writing any comments, right? Nothing like that. So I think we should incentivize SCI surveys and provide an additional midterm one.
Thank you, candidates. Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Okay, Jasper, then Camille.
I'm just going to say I'm still mad at Lisa from GSJ 101 for not giving me the 2% extra credit she said she would for filling out that survey. That's all.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really glad people have started to discuss the midterm review survey. That was actually the exact intention of including it within Senate 226, so that future generations of senators are aware of sort of the need and the value that it provides in terms of making sure that the changes that they want are actually visible. And of course, this before they sort of reach the end, because otherwise what's really the point. I think as well, making sure that we're having those midterm, changing our SEI policies to making sure that the midterm reviews are mandatory within our policies.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out, was to highlight the use of these surveys and the impact it has on the education, and these can be done through informal class discussions. Also, as AMS, this is something that we can promote among the students. So they understand the actual use of this, and that can be the incentive instead of just giving them a gift card or point blank money to fill out the surveys. This is something that could be more useful.
I think another thing that can be done to incentivize SEI surveys is telling the students what it means to the professors, because my first 2 years here, I didn't know what an SEI survey, I didn't know how it affected the professors. I didn't even do them unless they were remarks.
One thing that I think ties into talking about how Senate would communicate with students is that these SEI surveys, as they have said, are not something people really understand the point of. And if we were better communicating the reasons why we have these, the way that they can actually benefit student experience, that's something that I think would also incentivize students to fill them out more.
Okay. With that, okay, last one. We'll on to the next question.
I also think it's really important that faculties take action when SEI surveys overwhelmingly come to the same conclusion. For example, the math department, when certain professors or certain teaching styles have again and again and again come up in SEI surveys as a negative experience for students. I think it's really important that we have enforcement mechanisms to make sure that the policy follow up on that and fix the problem so the students in the future can have a better experience.
Okay. With that, move on to the next question. I think I hear UBC Jazz Club starting their jam on top of the egg right now, so we'll have some lovely background noise for the rest of the debate. Great, next thing up. Incumbents, could you please tell us one individual accomplishment you've had in this role? And new candidates, could you please tell us one thing that qualifies you for this role? Looking at my sheet, we'll start with Kareem.
Sure, when it comes to individual accomplishments, I just want to say first and foremost that the vast majority of what happens on Senate is a team effort. We're an 18-person caucus. We meet before every Senate meeting, and we act in lockstep and in tandem to get common goals accomplished. That being said, there are some things that I can attribute that I've probably held up more weight than others, and that's, for example, doing the caucus co-chair role, organizing meetings before every Senate meeting with Camille, the other co-chair, and then also writing up the agendas. I've also been probably the most progressive senator in terms of transparency and posting updates on social media and co-authoring all the Senate Recentered articles, etc. And then I've also been quite vocal on the Senate floor when it comes to important things that affect students. For example, when they wanted to add the VPRI to as a voting seat of Senate, I was the one who brought up the motion to kill that.
Thank you, candidate. Alex?
Thank you. Well, I think what's really important to realize is that a lot of my candidates are from a similar faculty, and like we've talked about, there's a lot of differences between faculty and department. Now, I'm particularly interested in academic policy in relations to myself and my friends in science, because it is much different than perhaps the experiences some of my fellow candidates have in arts. So I think having that diversity, that different perspective on Senate is so important, because while clearly some of the incumbents have represented us very well, they don't have that first-hand experience I believe you have when you're in a different faculty. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can highlight my experience working with the federal housing. I was the youngest member in the team, and being able to push for proper use of pronouns and leading an Indigenous outreach as a 20-year-old in a room full of people whose careers have been double than my existence is not something that everyone can do, and I have done that and proven that. So persuasiveness and holding my ground is something that I'm good at.
Thank you. Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the obvious thing for me that kind of would make me qualified, I guess, for this position is that I've previously served on UBC Okanagan Student Union as the representative of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences in my first year before transferring. And so in that position, I advocated for ranked ballots for future elections on that campus. And you know, that experience would translate well into this position. And I've also been, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Solomon, go ahead.
To quote the movie John Wick, I'm a man of focus, commitment, and sheer will. Over the past many years of my life, I have been fully focused and committed to advocacy. In high school, I was leading all of my school's advocacy for LGBTQ visibility and reconciliation. Since I've been working tirelessly with the NDP, with the provincial government for progressive legislation, for getting more youth involved in politics. I have been an advocate for lowering the voting age to 16. And since coming to UBC, I have been working tirelessly with the AUS, running to be AUS first year rep, planning events, trying to work on a first year policy book, and going to Faculty of Arts Council meetings and AUS Council meetings to make sure that I am advocating for students the best way possible. So it's my experience and focus that I think will make me a strong candidate for this position.
Thank you. Jasper, go ahead.
Yeah, so through DUC, which is one of the AMS resource groups that do disability advocacy, I have already worked with a lot of senators on issues related to the Senate, related to disability, related to accommodations. I have been working with both the people on Senate and people in the CFA for LR7 review, which a couple of people mentioned already. It's why I have such a large platform about accessibility. I know the issues and I've been working to advocate for them on the student at large side, and I think that I could do very well on the Senate side as well because I've already been working with senators on those issues.
Saif, go ahead.
So I don't have as much experience with dealing with Senate and UBC and student government as everyone else here, but I have been working since I was 12, people from the ages of 0 to 100 at a camp that I helped run in Miracle Valley. Currently I'm the director of recreation there, and so every year at the end of each camp, I'm going to go on to people and talking to them, being like, how can we improve? Like, what did we do great? What did we do wrong? And at the end of the year, even sometimes at the end of camps, I'm on rewriting policies and talking to staff and making sure everything is going great and happening on time and on schedule.
Thank you. Last but not least, Kamal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with Kareem that, you know, a lot of what we do is a team effort. We're 18 of approximately 80, so a lot of what we do requires the willpower of a large community. However, I will say that I think I've probably been the most active student senator in getting things done for students. You know, particularly, I think when that revolves around the review for the policy related to exam hardships. You know, in my role as vice chair of the academic policy committee, work very closely with the current chair of the academic policy committee to put together the terms of reference for a policy review committee that will look at both that policy and the policy related to the use of the formal examination period. And of course, I've also played a very fundamental and very key role in the creation and the drafting of our triennial student priorities called Senate 2026, which outlines a lot of what candidates have indicated in their platforms. We've thought of and we've put forward and are really hoping to see a lot of work get done on.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? I think I cut you off a bit early. Great, Green, go ahead.
I think there is a big advantage to having incumbents continue in the role just because Senate has such a steep learning curve and Senate operates so slowly. Every other senator, by the way, who isn't a student gets elected for a 3-year term because Senate operates in 3-year cycles, which is why we have Senate 2026 and then we'll have Senate 2029 after that. And it's really important for the same senators to be able to have that experience on the committees that they sit on and to be able to have that continuity there. So I think there's a big advantage to having some experienced people on the playing field with you.
Solomon, go ahead.
Just as a response to that, I also think it's important to have new people coming into spaces all the time. As important as experience is, and I'm never going to deny that, I think experience is very important. It's also important that fresh ideas are being brought forward and that new people are always able to advocate for the causes that are coming up in their communities now.
I saw Alex's hand first and then Kareem. Oh, I think you raised your hand. Sorry. Gonna redo the order. Yeah.
I agree. Experience speaks volumes. We want people that can kind of start off strong day one. But I think what's also important about getting new voices, especially of the younger years, is most crucially is we will be the ones experiencing these academic policy changes we want to propose. These third and fourth years have the experience, but they may not be the ones experiencing this firsthand because they'll be graduating. So I think there's something to say about when you actually have to go through with these policies.
So Tashiba, then Kamal.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that advocacy should be a lifestyle, not just a role or a title. For me, it's whether it's striking up conversations with my professors on how they could increase student engagement in class, or also talking to the department head about merging the engineering faculty with some of the poli-sci courses to create a more mainstream holistic education. These are conversations that I have on a daily basis, and I think this is an important skill to have.
I have to say, Alex, that's the first time I was called old on a debate stage. So thanks. But no, I think experience brings a large depth of value. You know, the way that I look at it is it often takes your first year in Senate to really even understand how the Senate works and the complexity of it. It takes then the next couple of years to actually get the work done and really start initiating and getting things done for students, which is why I think I personally have had so much success, as well as some of the incumbents have had so much success in accomplishing things, because you really bring that value and you understand how to navigate the complex bureaucracy that exists at UBC, because it is extremely complicated.
Would anyone else like to use their additional response time? Not, we'll move on to the next question. Okay. Next up, perennial question. What committees, singular or plural, would you want to sit on if elected, and why? We'll start with Alex.
Well, I think with some of my responses, academic policy is definitely chief among them. I think, again, because I do come from a different faculty, I have a different perspective, especially in the realm of academic policy. I think the other one I really want to stand on is the the disciplinary committee regarding academic misconduct. I think that's also very, very important coming from a different faculty, because we have those different types of rules and perhaps different procedures for how to punish people when they commit academic misconduct. So yeah, I think definitely these two committees the most, because from a different faculty, I think I can contribute the most to these two particular committees.
So this is also a part of my VP academic goal. I would like to firstly be a part of the awards committee and the academic policy committee. Mainly first one because I really want to see the scholarship increase with tuition spikes, especially in the recurring scholarships, which is students who get a scholarship on a continuous basis along their 4 years actually decreases because of the tuition increase, and that's something that I want to advocate for. And academic policy, as I highlighted before, the inclusion of a syllabus on SSC is something that I'm advocating for, and so being on academic policy is going to help me achieve that goal.
Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the committees that I want to be on is the academic policy committee, the curriculum committee, and the teaching and learning committee. The curriculum committee, apologies.
No worries. I know that jazz is a bit of background noise as well, so if the door opens during your question period, I'll give you a few extra seconds, so don't stress about pausing if and when that happens. Okay, next up.
Yeah, so the first committee that I definitely want to be on is the awards committee. A big part of my platform is that there should be not just increases in the scholarships we offer, but that also UBC should be offering more scholarships. Say you went to UVic with an 80% average, you could be getting a $2,000 entrance scholarship. UBC, being in one of the most expensive cities in Canada, really should be offering that. So that's a big goal of mine. And at the risk of parroting everybody else, obviously academic policy and teaching and learning, those are really important, I think, to goals I have for accessibility, like LR7 review, more recorded lectures, and pushing for students to be able to self-certify to get exam accommodations.
Thank you. Jasper, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with everyone's favorite, academic policy. Everyone says it, it's great. I've been doing a lot of work with LR7 from an advocacy perspective. I have been working with a lot of people within the CFA, within the Senate, and with the Board of Governors. I know what the student community wants to see with that, and I would like to work on that through the Senate. And then also teaching and learning. So through DUC, I worked on the Access for All petition, which involved a lot of student data about accessibility and what students needed to see, and made recommendations based on that. So I have that experience, and it's work I'd like to continue to do on teaching and learning as well.
Unlike everyone here, I do not want to be on the academic policy committee. I feel it wouldn't be the best for my skill set, considering I am not a tried and true academic. The place I would like to be on is the library committee. I feel like I have a lot to bring to that. And also on the teaching and learning committee, considering I have been a teacher, a WSI, I teach swimming, and I have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, so I currently serve as Vice Chair of the Academic Policy Committee. I would like to continue that. I also serve as Chair of the Budget Committee of the Council of Science, which I would like to continue as well. I'm Chair of the Agenda Committee, as well as a member of the Nominating Committee. I think all of those committees provide a really great outlook into making sure that we're able to do what we need to do for students when it comes to reviews of policies related to exams, when it comes to making sure we're able to advise on appropriate budgetary allocations for student priorities, or whether it comes to setting the direction of the Senate agenda to make sure that it's conscious and always aware of what students need.
Yes, a lot of the issues that we're talking about comes down to the modus operandi of the university and how internally academic policy is governed. So Academic Policy Committee is a committee that I currently serve on, and there's lots of important policies that are in the next year or two for review, including policies like V101, V102 and 103, which are really important policies when it comes to student examinations. I also want to be on the curriculum committee because I strongly believe in the implementation of the Indigenous Strategic Plan and ISP Goal 4 in particular, which is indigenizing the curriculum. And I think that's really important that we incorporate Indigenous ways of knowing and knowledge into every academic degree program that we offer at the university. And the last committee I'd like to be on is Agenda Committee, because topics of broad academic interest is something that's coming up in the next few years. And I think that I have a lot to bring to the table when it comes to conversations around what we can talk about moving forward. Thank you.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
One of the committees I do want to be on is the Teaching and Learning Committee to advocate for more online or hybrid classes, specifically for the summer months, because while I do like in-person classes, I feel like I and many other students would have taken more summer classes throughout their degrees if they could do it at home. I know, at least where I'm from, it's much easier to find like a part-time job over the summer at home, and being able to take classes on top of that would be beneficial, and I think that would be great for all students and for accessibility.
Anybody else? Great. Then we'll move right along. This is a bit of a longer question, so I'm happy to repeat it before anyone answers. The Student Senate Caucus proposed a Senate 2026 memo with priorities for the next 3 years. The 6 themes are equity, experiential learning, student academic support, accountability, appeals, and reviews. If you had to pick one to focus on for the next year of your term, which one would you pick and why? As a reminder, we've got equity, experiential learning, student academic support, accountability, appeals, and reviews. We'll start with Tashiba.
Sure. I would pick to be on the student academic support. Again, this is one of the priorities of my VP academic goals as well. Increasing academic support and advising capacity is something that we should aim for in the coming years, considering that there's long wait lists and long lines for students to currently access any sort of academic advising. And also misinformation is one of the problems, because if I personally went to 2 advisors and they both told me different things about the same issue, and I don't think that's right. I don't think any student should have to face that. That's something that we need to work on, retraining and providing equal and equitable information to all the advisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, go ahead.
I would focus on the experiential learning. aspect. I think that the world has gone through a lot in the past few years, and I feel like it's going to go through even more in the next few. So we've talked about AI policies, we've talked about online courses, and now we have this whole generation of COVID kids coming into university and who may be struggling with the academic environment at UBC. And so experiential learning, I think, would be good to focus on, especially just, education is changing, and I get UBC needs to adapt.
Great, thank you. Solomon.
Yeah, I think this is a hard question because I'm really passionate about a lot of the themes in this document, but if I had to make, my first pick would probably be equity. I think the creation of a permanent committee on academic diversity and inclusion is a really important thing to make sure all student needs are being met. I think it's really important that we're implementing the Indigenous Strategic Plan and LR7 review so that students who have temporary undiagnosed conditions are being better represented in their academic needs is really important. Other than that, I'd also really focus on student academic support. Academic support is actually one of my platform headings, and I think the hybrid education, the exam database, the affordable policy textbook, those are all things that I would really work hard to make sure get passed.
Yeah, so I'm going to say equity as well. So LR7, I've talked about it a lot because I've already done a lot of work on it. But I also think when you look at the other goals, like for example, student academic support, you can't look at those issues without the framework of equity, right? You cannot look at affordability without the understanding of systematic disadvantages. You cannot look at access to physical spaces. You cannot look at textbooks. You cannot look at anything without realizing that some people are disadvantaged and some people need extra support through equity, through goals set by committees, especially the ad hoc committee that was in the goals. And I think that you need to recognize that framework when you're looking at everything, which is why it's the most important.
My focus would mostly be on student academic support, because we are student representatives, and so we are for the students. We want the hybrid education, we want the later course withdrawal date, so whatever we as students want, we should be supporting that and pushing that.
Yeah, goal 3, student academic support is definitely the one that draws me the most. As elected representatives of the highest academic governing body at the institution, it makes sense that is sort of the focal point, particularly goal 3.2 when we talk about sort of the course withdrawal date and extending that to near the last hit classes. Senate did that in 2019/2020, and again in 2021. Other peer institutions do that. It's something very reasonable for us to look at. Goal 3.6 is the inclusion of past syllabi during course registration. 3.4 is 24/7 library access, and 3.3, of course, which I've talked about again and again, the review of the both exam policies, V102 and V103. I think those are all very central and crucial to the academic lives of students, and it's important that we're really placing that at the top of the agenda.
Kareem?
Yeah, if I just do a quick quantitative analysis, goal 3, student academic support, is actually the one that lines up with my platform the most. In fact, out of the 11 subsections of the section of Senate 2026, which is a document that I'm very familiar with, 7 of the 11 sections are in my platform in some shape or another. And I echo Camille's comments around both V102 and V103 around the exam policies, because it's unfair for students to have exams scheduled in the last 2 weeks of classes before they're preparing for finals. I also believe strongly in pushing back the add-drop deadline, which has institutional precedent already, as well as pushing for hybrid education, affordable textbook policies in tandem with more open educational resources, as well as the mid-course feedback piece to make sure that courses are revised before the bulk of their assessment.
Thank you. For future questions, if you could just be a little further from the mic, that would be great. Thanks. Go ahead.
Well, I think, like many of my fellow candidates have said, student academic support is really important, but what actually drew my eye is the appeals part of it. I think that, like it was previously mentioned, in appeals we should try and take a step back, look at the picture in the big sense. I don't think we should immediately strike to enforce the maximum punishment. I believe that there are always the different circumstances, and this ties into the equity part where people maybe based on personal issues, based on background. Maybe they felt like the only way is to unfortunately commit misconduct. So I think definitely equity, student support all ties into the appeals process, which is why I'm interested in it.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, we had to pick one goal, so it was hard, but I think equity is a very, very important piece of that. That's why we actually made it sort of the first goal, so that's the first thing you come across when you're reading the document, because we sort of recognize sort of the vital role that it plays throughout every other goal that we have in making sure that it's being embedded and ingrained through the work that we do. Goal 1.1, the creation of the Standing Committee on Academic Diversity and Inclusion, that's been something that's been on the go for a long time. We're really hopeful that post the external review that's currently being conducted, that we'll get to a place where implementation of that is actually possible.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I also want to say that all 6 goals are interconnected. For example, when we talk about affordable textbook policy and access to open educational resources, that also ties into experiential learning, and it makes it a lot easier for people to be able to do research, especially undergraduate research, which the caucus as well as the AMS has been pushing for very strongly. And I also think equity ties into absolutely everything we do, because student academic support has to be viewed through an intersectional lens where we realize that supporting students is not a one-size-fits-all, but that people have diverse backgrounds and we need to accommodate them based on their positionality. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out within the, sorry, which committee was it? Academic one, and the awards committee. I would like the reallocation of funding to not be done in a way that it disadvantages a certain group of students. For instance, the Trek scholarship was specifically put towards the experiential learning, but it took away the funding from international students only, and that was for $4,000 each student, and I don't think that a merit-based scholarship should have been compromised in that way.
Anybody else? Okay. I think we'll move on to some audience questions to mix things up. But I think we'll be finishing this debate a little early, but we'll go to audience questions, move back to moderator questions, see where we're at. The first one is specifically for our 2 incumbents. As a reminder, you'll have 30 seconds with no additional time to answer these. Some of your platform points echo or repeat promises that you made last year. Could you not accomplish these because they weren't possible to implement, or were there more pressing things to do in your time in Senate? Start with Kamal.
Yeah, I think as we brought up time and time again, the Senate is a very slow-moving body, right? It takes some time to be able to get things done, but I think what we have seen is that continued sort of accomplishment towards making sure we start the process of getting things done. Particularly, again, when we talk about the exam policies, when we talk about guidance for open education resources, when we talk about guidelines and regulations for the usage of ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence, when we talk about establishing priorities for the caucus, when we talk about library access, all of these things, a lot of the work for it has gotten started, the ball is rolling, it's down the hill pretty much, and we need to get it over the finish line, so, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't give you any warnings on time there. Kareem, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say there's a reason it's called Senate 2026 and not Senate 2024. It's because Senate operates in trienniums, these 3-week cycles. And I'm sorry, 3-year cycles. I wish 3 weeks. The Senate operates in trienniums, 3-year cycles, and a lot of the work and a lot of the focus should be transitioning new student senators. And I hope that regardless of whether I get elected or not, I'm going to play a role in helping hand down information and skills and knowledge to the people who are picking up the torch. That way, the goals that are longer term can be implemented, not this year or next year, but maybe the year after that forward.
Okay. This next audience question is for all candidates. So this is from a science student who's concerned that there's a chance that only art students will be representing them at the student senator at large level. But for all candidates, how would you, accurately represent people that are a part of a faculty that you aren't a part of? We'll start with Kyle. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Well, for me, most, if not all, of my platform is not, art specific, even though I am an art student. We all have the same exam schedule or exam timeline. We all have the same, library access and that kind of thing. So, I think my platform would benefit all students, not just art students.
Solid, good.
Yeah, I want to say that I really care about advocating for all students and all faculties, and I think that AUS has taught me a lot about how that has to work. In my role as AUS first year rep, I've been having pretty much weekly meetings with the year reps from all the other faculties to understand what events are they doing, what do they want to see happen. I've been especially working closely with science and engineering, and I think it's important that when I get elected, I want to continue to fight for all students, continue to advocate for all students, and also I want to continue meeting with people from their faculties, working with the faculty senators to make sure that I am doing the best thing for all students at UBC.
Thank you. That's right.
Yeah, so if you look at my platform, there's a bit in there about required lab equipment and supplies being free. I'm in arts. Again, I don't have lab equipment, but this came out of conversations I had with a couple of science students and a couple of engineering students about the barrier to access for doing labs. This is part of a consultation I did when I was working on my platform. It's something I will continue to do if I get elected to Senate. And it's also something I've been doing with accommodation policy and academic concession policy, because all of that is very faculty dependent, and I've had to have lots of conversations about that in that work as well.
So how I would do that is I just ask people, like, what do you, like with Solomon, you can go to the first year reps or even reps from those faculties and be like, what do you need, what do you want, what can I do for you to help you become better, and what can I do on Senate that'll help you?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of there being a student senate caucus. There's 5 at-large seats, there's 13 faculty seats. The faculty seats are very specifically represented faculties, and I think leaning on that experience and the wonderful expertise that they bring, our science team senator currently is on the academic policy committee to make sure that we have that diversity represented. But I think as well, sort of in my at-large roles for the last couple of years, I've done nothing but represent all students. I think, when we talk about exam hardships, that's something that applies broadly to all students. In fact, I'd say in some cases probably more to students in other faculties in arts. When we talk about open education resources, artificial intelligence, all of that is broadly applicable across the board.
Yeah, I'll say like the biggest privilege of being an at-large senator is that you represent all faculties, and all you campaign to represent the entire student body, not a specific faculty. In fact, I think like arts students taking up positions in the student government is something that's kind of across the board an issue. But I think the beauty of Senate, like Camille said, is that over 2/3 of our caucus, 13 of 18, are one from every single faculty of the university. And when we have student Senate caucus meetings, we make sure to lean on their expertise with regards to things that affect their faculty on the Senate agenda.
Well, I'm kind of fortunate in this issue because I am in science, but I think what's very important is what Solomon said. I think we should strengthen and build relationships with like the different faculty societies and different department societies. Let's be clear, as Senate, we are a little bit more centralized. Our ear may not be as close to the ground to these specific issues as these societies may be based on department. So it's important for us to have that strong communication so they can tell us specifically what we as student senators at large need to accomplish.
Last step.
I would like to start by highlighting that my platform again benefits all the students. Having a syllabus on SSE during course registration is not just limited to one specific faculty or such as arts, but it's going to benefit all students across UBC. And again, I would engage in conversations with diverse faculties and constituencies to keep up with what their issues are, and also honestly encourage them to come up and run for elections. I mean, look at us, majority of us are poli-sci, IR, urban studies, and that doesn't represent us at all, so we can all do better.
Thanks everyone. Got the exciting music happening in the background. We'll move on to back to moderator questions for now, and again, see how long those take. Next up, we'll be going from left to right again. There have been several discussions in Senate over the past couple of years about UBC's international agreements with universities from countries with poor human rights records. What stance do you think the Senate should be taking, and how should it be implemented? We'll start with Solomon. You have 45 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really important question. As the Senate, we have to be making sure that we are not only supporting students at UBC, but also supporting students globally and supporting people around the world. And it is really important that we aren't aiding and abetting universities in countries with poor human rights abuses. It's important that the Senate take on a strong role as an advocate for global issues, because we have a global student body. We have a globally diverse set of students coming here, and it's important that we are doing our role as global citizens.
Yeah, so this is a platform point of mine. So I think it is really important to cut ties with universities that are complicit in human rights abuses, but I also think it's important to recognize that that's not the same as cutting ties with universities in countries that are complicit. Universities are often the front grounds of activist movements against countries that are committing human rights abuses. But there are still universities that are unsafe for queer people. There's still universities that are absolutely complicit. They develop military policy that harms people. There needs to be a distinction made there, but absolutely there should be, ties should be cut with those universities.
I think Senate should have a strong policy on this, because we are sending our students to those countries, those universities, and if it's unsafe for them, we shouldn't even be sending students there in the first place. We shouldn't be offering those options. Like if they get harmed there, what's to say is not going to come back on us.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because, I think the last Student Caucus and this caucus have been very fundamental to making sure that this is something that is addressed. I would say largely to the credit of the caucus is the reason why this is even a conversation that's currently happening within the Senate. The Student Senate caucus was very firm in the fact that until there's a plan brought forward by the Provost Office, that we would not be moving forward with the approval of any new international agreements. And now the Provost Office has gone back to develop within their own committee and within their own task force a plan and criteria as to what will define international agreements that we have moving forward. I absolutely think, I think what Jasper brought up is very important, that distinction being made between universities that are complicit and that are committing, human rights violations. And I think in consultation with the Student Senate Caucus, as well as with other university stakeholders, the Provost Office will arrive with a set of criteria that will reflect that decision.
Great.
Yeah, this exact same question was asked last year, and I think that goes to show how slow the Senate really operates. And I do have to say that it's a shame that this process has been as slow as it is. I wish the Provost's office has acted with more urgency because, like other people have said, this is really a life or death issue if you come from a marginalized group. I really want to echo what Jasper said in particular, which is that it's important that we look at things on a case-by-case basis. It's different from that a university. There's a difference between a university directly causing harm to the people in their jurisdiction versus the university simply being located in a jurisdiction where there's harms being committed. Canada, we commit lots of human rights abuses around the world. We saw weapons in Saudi Arabia, et cetera, but where no one's calling for us to cut ties with other universities within the Western world. So I think it's important that we have a very holistic view of this.
Alex, yeah.
Thank you. I really agree with what was being said. I don't think it's fair to penalize an entire university just because of what their country believes. I believe it needs to be much more specific than that. I also believe that education and academics in general, it's a very universal type of subject. I think it's what unites us rather than divides us. But certainly, I think historically there are certain places where, especially since we represent all students, if we are sending them to places where they could be at risk, that's on us. So we definitely need to be more vigilant about how we kind of negotiate these agreements. But I think overall, I think it's a benefit to have this international perspective in education.
Yeah, of course. Ethically, we should not be promoting or keeping ties with universities specifically that compromise on human rights. And we should, because essentially we should not be compromising on the safety of our students who have gone on exchange or research, and it is our responsibility to bring them back safe. And also, in the meantime, while these long bureaucratic processes are being finished, one thing we can do is train and let the Go Global offices know that they need to be spreading awareness about the presented risks of picking certain universities over another to help them make better and safer choices.
I just don't have, I guess, enough information to adequately provide a very specific answer, other than I obviously don't want to be supporting people or institutions that are violating human rights. That is not the ideals of UBC or Canada as a whole.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time on this question? Hello, Kareem and then Jasper.
You know, I just want to say I think it's really important that the standards we apply are consistent across jurisdictions. I do find it quite hypocritical that after Russia invaded Ukraine, we instantly cut ties with Russian institutions that are affiliated with the Russian government in any way, but we're not willing to have that conversation around other jurisdictions, particularly jurisdictions like Israel. And I think it's really important that we have those broader conversations that have consistent moral frameworks that we're working within.
Jasper, go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Kareem said there. I was going to say something similar. Specifically, there are universities in Israel that are absolutely tied to human rights abuses. Tel Aviv, for example, houses the Institute for National Security Studies, which is a think tank that has really close ties to the Israeli military and has been a think tank that has created policies and ideas that has caused a lot of harm. But I also, at a second more personal level, when I was looking to go global for myself, I was given basically an unofficial list of universities that I might get killed at for being trans, and that is a really awful thing to reconcile.
Would anyone else like to use their time? If not, I think considering the noise and the length of this debate, we'll move on to one more moderator question and then closing statements. Okay. As the incumbent senators have likely learned, student and faculty senators can often disagree on where Senate's focus should lie or what policies it should implement. How would you balance pushing for student priorities with likely wanting to keep cordial relationships with your fellow senators? We'll start with Jasper.
Yeah, so I think it is really important to have those disagreements and have those conversations, but at the end of the day, I think the Senate Student Caucus needs to make a decision on something and then stick together. I think the worst thing that can happen is if there is disagreement and chaos when it comes to voting, because the Senate Student Caucus is supposed to be a very important bloc that can make a lot of changes for students, and if there is strife, that causes a lot of problems. I think that up until the day of the Senate meeting in which they're voting, there should be as much conflict, as much disagreement, as much discourse as necessary, but it should be with the goal of making a decision so people can be a unified front at the end of the day.
I think that it's important that we all have, conversations about things, like even outside of meetings, just in day-to-day life, saying, I think something this is right, you think this is wrong, and just maintaining a cordial relationship so that we're not, arguing, we're not on, completely opposite sides.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Students and faculty senators can disagree on where the Senate's focus should lie or what kind of policies should be implemented. How would you balance pushing for student priorities with keeping cordial relationships with other senators?
Yeah, this is a great question. As I mentioned earlier, the student senators are 18 of around 80, and so often in order to get things done that are student-centric, you require the buy-in of other blocs and of other folks. And so, I spent my last, couple years on Senate, as well as my role as VP Academic, building those relationships and building that legitimacy with a lot of the other university folks that are there, whether that be deans, whether that be faculty, whether that be convocation senators, to really understand that sort of the things that we bring forward as a caucus, the things that I bring forward as an individual student senator, really come from a good place and come from the place of wanting to help and wanting to make the student experience much better. And I think there's a recognition of that and a place of wanting to work with us to arrive at a place of compromise, because ultimately the body is about compromise because there's such diverse opinions, diverse interests, and so it really requires people who have been there for a little while, who have some of the legitimacy in the caucus and within the Senate itself to get to a place of achievement.
Thank you. Great.
I've actually found most of the faculty senators quite amicable to work with. I think a lot of the student priorities that get passed are because a significant number of faculty senators join and vote with us. I think that often the provost's office votes as a block, the Student Senate Caucus, while we have free votes, often votes together. And then faculty senators that are by far the largest block on Senate, if we can get half of them to come join us, then we're able to get things done. And a lot of faculty and students have the same priorities. For example, when I passed the motion to stop the VPRI from becoming a voting member of Senate, that was because it would have disadvantaged and lowered the ratio of student senators on Senate, but also would have done the same for faculty senators as well. And it's really important that we collaborate with faculty senators where it's in our best interest for both of us to do so.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what was said is very true. Like overall, we all seek in Senate to help improve our UBC community, regardless if we're staff, faculty, or student. I believe that the staff and faculty have the lived-in experience that perhaps we as the students are a little bit more fresh-faced, a little bit more progressive, and maybe even more aggressive with what we want. And we need to learn how to balance that. Like we said, we're only 18 out of 80. If we do the math, we're nowhere near a majority to pass anything. So I think it's a really key thing for us to compromise. It's not compromising your ideals. I believe compromising in these terms, in these situations is necessary to get anything done.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course, I understand that each faculty senator has their own faculty priorities and they're going to push for it. And it is our duty to consider that, but also at the same time keep the larger goals in mind as to what's going to benefit the university overall and at large. And that's what we're for, senators at large. And of course, teamwork is essential. And of course, because there's only 18 out of 88 of us, from what I counted last, so we can win more together.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So yeah, people are gonna, people in the Senate or Student Senate Caucus are gonna disagree with one another, and that's okay. That's part of the democratic process. We're here to represent students, but I do think it is important that the Student Senate Caucus does stick together when we do vote, as we do collectively represent the student body. And talking with regular students outside Senate meetings, I think would be beneficial to see what priorities they want to see, and that could help guide us. But at the end of the day, we're here to work for students, and we have to work together to compromise to get the best for the student body.
Go ahead.
Firstly, I want to say that I'm glad there's agreement among everybody here that as a group, even if we have disagreements, we need to find ways to vote together and vote as a bloc. The second thing I want to say is that, yes, it's really important that we have cordial relationships with the faculty senators. As many other people here have said, is something that we need to do if we want to get anything passed. And I want to say that I have a lot of experience with that through AUS. I've been sitting on the Faculty of Arts Council. I've been voting on issues there, and I've been working on legislation to bring forward there. So I have experience with that. And I also want to say that I hope the Senate next year will not be compromising on our values, even if that is something important. We need to be strong in our values, but still willing to work with the other senators.
Would anyone like to use their additional response time? Go ahead.
Well, I think what's really important, and what I've heard Senate has been actively promoting, is the idea where even though we are a student caucus, there needs to be an encouragement of independent thought. I believe, yes, it is clear that certain issues, it would be very nice if we are all aligned, and I believe for a majority of issues, clearly tonight you see that we share a lot of the same beliefs in terms of the different policies, but I think it's very important that we are not considered such a hardline party, or party bloc, that people are afraid of voting against if they feel like for their faculty, it disadvantages them.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
So yeah, as someone who's been in the Senate room, I think that, despite the, people like to say, the glacial pace of Senate, I found Senate to be actually one of the bodies of the university where students have the biggest impact. Because when 18 student senators agree on something, and we're saying to the administration, we don't like what's happening and we want things to go another way, faculty are willing to listen, and faculty, like students, often come from very open-minded, progressive backgrounds. I mean, these people work at a university for 8 hours a day, right? And I think that when faculty and students team up, we can get a lot done, and I think that it's important to have an amicable relationship across those two demographics.
Great. Thank you. I'm hearing from my team there are 85 senators, so 18 is still not a majority, but thank you all. Okay, I guess for now, for today, we'll move on to closing statements. And we'll start with Sahib. We'll go left to right as usual. You all have 1 minute. Thanks.
So I just want to thank everyone for attending this debate here. You know, it's a very small room, and
Still a lot of people here. So I just want to read what's on my platform. We have having a community student focus, keeping libraries open 24/7, increasing hybrid options and remote learning opportunities. Also recorded lectures and live stream lectures as well. And also increasing the transparency and accountability within the Senate. Making us student senators accountable to the students. Publishing meeting minutes earlier and allowing for meetings to be held openly with students and faculty in attendance.
Yeah, I want to also thank everyone for coming. I know this has been a longer debate than we all had hoped. But I think ultimately it comes down to recognizing experience does matter, right? And I think I've proven that. I think we've shown that in the various roles that I've had in the Senate, we've delivered on I outlined the priorities for the Student Senate Caucus for the next 3 years. We've delivered on artificial intelligence. We've started to deliver on academic hardships, on making sure that the library is open 24/7 during final exam period, making sure that we're able to extend the course withdrawal date. There's a lot of work that is on the go that will require a push to get us over the edge. I'm very excited and hopeful to want to be able to move us in that direction if elected. My platform centers on continuing a lot of that great work that we've started, and including sort of developing policy to cap textbook costs, as well as making sure we're working on the implementation of the Inclusion Action Plan, as well as the Indigenous Strategic Plan, and the STEER framework, and making sure that we are also working to implement lecture capture technology. There's much more, and you can check that out at votecamille.com.
Thank you. Kareem, go ahead.
Yeah, so this past year, I've put in work by organizing monthly meetings, writing articles, posting updates on social media, reading through some heavy committee materials, and reading through some unreadable university policies. From expensive textbooks to having no study spaces open past midnight on campus, there's a lot of work to get done. And I've told you what my policies are, but who exactly am I running for? I'm running for the student with disability who hasn't yet gotten diagnosed and can't access the resources that they need to succeed. I'm running for the student who works full-time and needs a library to study at late at night after their shift ends. I'm running for the student who has to make the impossible decision at the end of the day to either pay for dinner or pay for their textbook for their courses. A better UBC is possible, but it starts with us students, and I hope that as a fellow student, I can have your back and make sure that the university serves students like us first. Thank you so much, and I hope you can vote Kareem, and I can represent you next year as well. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, I think hearing this debate tonight, thank you for everyone for lasting almost 2 hours here. I think it's clear that all of the candidates, your Senate candidates this year, have very similar priorities, which is good because this means that all of us kind of keep our ear to the ground to varying degrees and understand what's important to the UBC student population. But let's be clear. For an at-large, to represent the at-large student body, I think it requires a multitude of perspectives, and we have that. But when we focus so hard on a single faculty, I think that we're at a disadvantage because even though our perspectives are different, there are experiences that I myself in science have that arts does not. There are experiences that arts have that I do not. So I think if we really want to represent students at large, we need to have that at-large representation.
Thank you. Shiva, go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank all the viewers, other candidates, and the UBC staff. Thank you for hearing me out and hearing us all out. I will reiterate my goals for my position, which is to decolonize academic curriculum and advocate for syllabus during course registration. This is not something that's going to benefit me or you, it's going to benefit all of us, and that's something that's important to keep in mind. And if elected, I will continue to push for these goals among other existing priorities. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for showing up and listening. So with experience in UBC Okanagan's student government, with experience in other leadership positions on campus and in the Metro Vancouver area, I believe that I am a great candidate for the UBC Senate. I want to see early exam breaks. Why do we have exams that go to December 22nd at 7 p.m.? That's so late. And it's cold and wet and snowy. And you know, for international students that are flying home for the holidays, that's a long time, and it's so late. You know, I want to see 24-hour library access. I want to see, you know, more online classes for the summers. You know, more flexibility for students, better time-saving measures, things like that. So, you know, check out kylerogers.ca or elect Kyle Rogers with more information in the coming days.
Go ahead.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to thank everybody who's been here, who's been listening, who submitted questions too. It's really good to hear what students care about. I just want to reiterate that my platform focuses on what I call the 3 A's of accessibility, academic support, and advocating for you. I want hybrid education, LR7 review, and more supports for students with disabilities. I want scholarships, an exam database, and affordable textbooks. And I want people to be able to self-report pronouns in lectures so that they don't get misgendered by profs. I want an academic diversity and inclusion committee, and I want training for appeals. So, if you want someone who has worked with many of the faculties, if you want someone who's experienced yet still brings a fresh perspective, if you want someone who's going to be focused and committed on fighting for you, then vote for Solomon from March 1st to 8th. Thank you.
Jasper?
I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm the last person speaking, so I'm gonna make this quick because I'm starving and I'm going to go eat dinner. Vote for me for accessibility, affordability, and ethics. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Senators will be back debating on Thursday at the Great Debate, and we will be back in half an hour or so with the Student Legal Fund Society candidates. Thank you, everyone.
working, and if you are a part of a slate, let me know what slate you're a part of.
Check, check. My name is Lucas. Nice to meet you. And I'm a part of the Student First Slate. Would you like some?
No, that's all.
That's all? Okay.
Okay, I am Bardia, and I'm part of the Student First Slate as well.
Welcome, Students First.
Daisy, also Students First.
Hi, I'm Jackie, part of Justice in Action.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm also part of Justice in Action. And I'm Devin. I'm also part of Justice in Action.
Unmute the live stream if it isn't already.
Oh, I already unmuted.
Okay. So I'll do a quick reminder of the rules, but special rule for the SLFS debates, there will only be 2 respondents to any question because there are 2 slates here. Any of you can answer any question, but only 1 person from each. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Only 1 person per slate may respond to an individual question. So please no trading off in the middle of the question or giving 1 person the response and 1 person the additional response. Just 1 person. Yeah, otherwise I'll go through the rules in general for the most exciting debate of the night. Welcome to the Student Legal Fund Society debate. My name is Annabella. I'm the coordinating editor of the UBC, your student paper. And we'll get to the rules. As a reminder, each of you will be given a 1-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. I'll ask questions, which each slate will get 45 seconds to respond, and after you've both given your individual response, you'll receive an additional 30 seconds to add comments or rebut what the other candidates have said. During the additional response time, raise your hand if you want to indicate you'd like to speak, and I'll call on you. You may opt not to use your additional 30 seconds, but each candidate will only be able to speak once during that time. You cannot ask another slate a question during the additional response time. Candidates, please only start speaking once I've called on you. I will give you a 15-second and a 5-second warning. You're expected to stop speaking when your time is up, and failure to do so will result in time being deducted from future answers. You may be asked to leave the debate if it's a consistent issue. Any questions about the rules before we get started? Okay. We'll have some live tweets going out on @UBC News, so feel free to follow along there. Great. Okay. All done with the rules, we'll get started with opening statements, starting with Students First Slate.
Perfect. Okay, so Students First is a slate dedicated to exactly that, putting students first. We are committed to providing accessible legal resources to increase accessibility to legal advice and representation for UBC students. We are very dedicated to promoting transparency and advocacy through the publishing of financial reports and implementing regular office hours for student inquiry, as well as ensuring that the SLFS effectively serves UBC's diverse student population. Voting students first means putting students back in control, voting for financial transparency, and voting for people who care and will fight for your rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Justice in Action Slate.
Fellow UBC community members, today I'm extremely enthusiastic to introduce Justice in Action's platform for the Student Legal Fund Society UACE. Our slate's committed to 3 key principles: accountability, commitment, and transparency. Firstly, under accountability, we vow to ensure fiscal responsibility by responsibly investing SLFS assets into opportunities that can protect SLFS assets from the impact of inflation, as well as provide more resources for years to come. Secondly, in commitment, we want to be available and accessible to every student. We pledge to hold regular office hours, provide services in multiple languages, and accommodate students with disabilities, including through an online booking system. Lastly, we emphasize transparency in our operations. By reforming bylaws, we ensure fair re-election procedures and embed accountability at every level. With your support, we can foster a community where every student feels empowered, informed, and supported.
Thank you. And just a reminder to turn off your microphone after the questions. Move on to the first moderator question. The SLFS has not held a single event in the past year and held very few the year before. Do you think this is indicative of a structural problem, and what do you think needs to change? We'll start with Justice in Action.
Oh, you might just need to press and hold for a second.
Thank you. Yeah, so you pointed out correctly that SLFS has not held a single event in the past year, which is unfortunate and disappointing for both, I know, members of my slate and members of my opposition, who are people who are excited to see the SLFS fulfill its purpose to make sure that students have access to justice. It is, I believe, indicative of a structural problem. The SLFS, I've had multiple people in the course of this election tell me, but it's only the SLFS. Like who even cares? And that shows that the SLFS is not being valued and is not being utilized properly, and this use is not being recognized by the AMS, and that's something that I'm looking forward to changing, should I be elected.
Okay. Student first.
I think that 100% it is a structural problem. I mean, as we saw last year and previous years, what you have is SFLS, I feel, is very niche. Not a lot of students know about it, so what happens is you'll have older students, typically students who are just about to graduate, who will run for SFLS because they need that extra notch on their resume, right? So then why do they need to hold any events? Why do they even need to update the website? I mean, they haven't in a year. The financial records on that website haven't been updated in 2 years, right? So they can just take our money and do whatever they want with it, and they don't have to be accountable, right? All of us here are first years, right? We are going to be here at UBC for at least 4 more years. Okay, we are going to be accountable to you because the actions that we take to defend our rights, well, they are our rights because we are going to be members of the student union for a long time to come. So that's what it boils down to, is do you want people who are going to be here for a while, or people who are just going to graduate so they don't care what they do?
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead.
Yeah, to specifically talk about what I would change. As a member of the Justice in Action slate, we would be holding 2 workshops per semester with partnerships with Advisory Center, looking to explore the possibility of updating old legal resources, the Legal Observer training, for example, and making sure that we're using SLFS resources and student resources to as they should be for student benefit.
Would you like to use your additional time?
I think that one of the things that we have promised is open and accessible meetings, right? So that's holding those meetings in a public place, having those meetings on Zoom so we can actually ask if they want to come and they want to ask us, hey, well, we would like this, we would like that. We also think that we need to revitalize the Student Legal Fund's Instagram so we can have, outreach to students. We also want to hold events that are specifically tailored to international students and some that are specifically tailored to domestic students, because the law affects those people differently and those people need tailored supports to help them in their endeavors.
Okay, moving on to the next question. What, in your view, is the core role of the Student Legal Fund Society? And if elected, how will you balance a focus on litigation versus education? We'll start with the student first slate.
I think that the primary goal of the Student Legal Fund is to stand up for the rights of students. I think that something that we saw, when the Student Legal Fund was founded is because students were suing the university because of unjust treatment. So I don't want to deviate from that mission. I think that education is a side benefit, but it isn't the main goal of the Student Legal Fund. The Student Legal Fund's main goal is to protect student rights and to advocate on behalf of students in a legal sense when it comes to the university and also when it comes to the province. So education is a must. We're going to partner with groups like the BC Civil Liberties Association, which I am a member, right? We're going to partner with these groups to try to educate youth on their rights, but at the same time, we're not going to deviate and we're not going to spend an exorbitant amount of funds on that because that isn't our core mission. Our core mission is to be a fund, to be a reserve in case we need to sue the university because they are doing something wrong.
Okay. Justice in Action.
As you know, the Student Legal Fund Society's mandate is to support litigation, advocacy, and lobbying for improved education and access. I believe that core role is found in the precedent-setting advocacy that's done at the provincial level. It is important to run workshops, to run regular workshops, and ensure that students are aware of the resources they have access to, and it's important to ensure that students are aware of the resources that they have access to, but it's more important to be pursuing litigation that is in students' best interest and litigation that will set precedent for students at UBC this year and in years to come.
Thank you. As I've told the other candidates, if there's jazz interruption, I'll give you a few extra seconds, so don't worry about that. Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Go ahead. I think use the microphone, if you wouldn't mind turning it off.
I think that when we talk about exploring litigation, we have to talk about the precedent-setting cases that are already happening across the country, whether it be, joining or supporting youth that have right now suing the federal government on climate change, right? Or looking at legal options on how we can leverage the university and the province to make amendments to the land use plan, the disastrous land use plan that's only going to hurt students and the environment here at UBC, especially given the fact that this is the Premier's riding and we are in an election year. So we have those tools at our disposal to leverage the government to have real action.
Okay, go ahead.
I believe that the best way to balance the litigation versus education balance is to look at the amount of money that is being spent on each. So making sure to budget ahead of time to ensure that there is enough money put aside for these educational workshops, but to ensure that the majority of the funds are available and are being used wisely to ensure that the Student Legal Fund Society will continue not only this year, but for many years in the future.
Next question. How would you ensure that potential requests for litigation funding are assessed in an accurate and informed manner, particularly if you are not a law student? We'll start with Justice in Action.
Thank you for asking. The simple answer is that it's in the SLFS bylaws. So requests for litigation are assessed by the litigation committee under the current bylaws, and the litigation committee includes a lawyer, a fully qualified lawyer, a law student, and members of the Student Legal Fund Society Board of Directors. So as a member of the Board of Directors, your job isn't to assess the legal merits of the case. Your job is to assess the value of that case to students. So the answer is you rely on the experts to do their job, and your job is to be a student and to look out for the best interest of students.
Thank you. Student first. How would you ensure potential requests for litigation funding are assessed in an accurate and informed manner, particularly if you aren't a law student?
So I want to start with saying that we are very experienced with that because 3 of us work in law firms. They're our members currently, and we also, apart from that, we come from a very diverse background, and we have a lot of other experiences. We have a member of the BC Liberties Association in our slate, and we also have a large experience in student politics. I think we're also the most diverse slate running for the candidacy currently. I think all that background comes into one where if we're elected, we're going to have a lot of different opinions and a lot of different methods to approach that. And we will have, with our clear communication through social media and through our website, we'll make sure to do that properly.
Would either of you like to use your additional response time? Oh, yep. Yeah. How would you ensure potential requests for litigation funding are assessed in an accurate and informed manner, especially if you aren't a law student? Go ahead.
Thank you for repeating. The other piece is that the existing, this would have been 2 years ago, so the Student Legal Fund Society Board of Directors came up with case funding criteria and guidance, and part of our platform is making this more accessible and easier to find on the website. It shouldn't be in a document buried on page 5 of 7. It should be available on the front page so that students know when they're submitting or considering submitting an application that they know what criteria it's being judged on. So to ensure transparency and accountability, we commit to making this material much more accessible.
Thank you. Would you like to use your time? Okay, go ahead.
One of our items in our platform under short-term goals is transparency and accountability, where we state we will publish monthly reports detailing SLFS activities, including caseloads and outcomes. So I think with that layer of transparency for our platform, we could, with these reports, something that the current SLFS has failed to do, we will, with these reports, be transparent in that case.
I'll move on to the next question. What workshops or other educational initiatives would you like to run, and what practical steps will you take to make sure they happen? We'll start with the student first, Slate.
Well, I think that when we talk about workshops, when we talk about legal education, one of the workshops that we really want to run is to help international students navigate Canada's legal system. One of our Slate members who is in here today is an international student and has been having problems getting a driver's license and getting other qualifications so that they can be a full functioning member of our UBC community, right? So actually holding those workshops to ensure that international students get the help that they need, as well as, you know, for Canadian students to say, well, these are your rights, right? We've been having a lot of protests on campus recently and across Metro Vancouver, and to say, you know, if a police officer stops you, these are your rights. If this happens to you, these are your rights, so that your voice isn't silenced. So we want to ensure that students are educated about their rights so that they can access them.
Justice in Action, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Some of the workshops that we specifically were looking at were a legal observer workshops. There's some amazing work being done in this area, but it's not held on campus, and so I'd love to bring in Defund 604 network, for example, to run these workshops with their existing partnerships on campus, so that students are better equipped to know their rights, to defend those rights, and to stand up for each other. We also discussed holding a tenant advocacy workshop, likely in partnership with AMS Advocacy, as well as the possibility of bringing David Evie back onto campus, as has been done in the past, potentially to do a Know Your Rights workshop.
Would you like to use your additional time? Go ahead.
One of the things that we also want to do is to develop legal resources that can be accessed on our website and that are tailored specifically to UBC students, so that, you know, if you have any legal questions, you know, we'll have a frequently asked questions section. We'll work with outside organizations and we'll partner with them to say, well, these are the issues we face. What are the most common legal questions that you get from students? Because we want to ensure that students have easy and readily available access to legal resources to inform themselves.
Go ahead.
One of the things that we'd be doing in terms of practical steps to make sure that these things happen is to build partnerships with these organizations, both on campus and off campus. I know that our Slate has strong connections on campus with organizations like SLFS, AMS Advocacy, and we'd be looking to expand into off-campus organizations as well. We'd also be looking to increase student awareness of existing legal resources, such as People's Law School, Access Pro Bono, SLFS itself, indeed, because a lot of these resources already exist, and it is a shame.
That's your time.
Thank you.
We'll have one more question and then move on to closing statements. How would you practically engage with students or make sure what you're doing is getting out there if elected? We'll start with Justice in Action.
Yeah. One of the things that we discussed was looking at, I know that there were some improvements done to the SLFS website, but more are still needed, clearly. We're looking to start an active Instagram, or restart if one exists, and then also to build partnerships with on-campus organizations, so that people think, their first thought is, let's reach out to the Student Legal Fund Society and or LSAP, rather than, you know, having to stumble through eons and spend lots of time stumbling through websites to try to even find. Third time's a charm.
one of the under commitment, we commit to being available and accessible, so holding regular office hours both in person and online, making sure that services are available in multiple languages and accommodations are easily available for students with disabilities. We know that equity deserving groups are more likely to not have access to justice, so it's very important to make sure that we are going out of our way to make sure that these services are accessible. We also plan to invest in students and hire a student admin assistant to make sure that we're serving students the best that we can.
Great, thank you. Student first.
Perfect. I mean, look at the room right now. There's hardly anyone here, so that clearly shows that SLS is not cared about or even known by UBC students. So definitely we want to establish a system where UBC students care and know that we exist, and also feel comfortable enough to reach out with questions or access our website or come to our office hours or do any things they can so that we can help them. So that's definitely one of our main goals.
Okay, and with that, we'll move on to closing statements to close out the debate for tonight. You have 1 minute to make these, starting with student first. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Is there a 30-second rebuttal? Is that not okay?
Oh, did I not give that for that last question?
Oh, I thought it was something separate. Is that different?
There's not a 30-second response for closing statements, no.
Okay.
Unless I'm mistaken about the rules here, but yeah. Okay. Student first, go ahead.
First, I want to thank all my fellow candidates and for you for your attention in this debate. In our campaign, Students First, we have emphasized a core belief that every student deserves unwavering support and access to justice. Our platform is grounded in this principle, focusing on enhancing legal advocacy, promoting transparency, and fostering diversity within the student legal fund society. Throughout this debate, we've highlighted tangible steps to achieve these goals. And beyond those, we promise monthly director meetings, open to the public, ensuring transparency in our actions. We recognize the importance of clear communication, pledging to keep students informed through our website and through social media. But beyond these promises lies a shared vision. A vision of a community where every voice is heard, every need is met, and every student feels empowered to navigate these legal challenges with confidence. As you consider your choice in the upcoming election, I urge you to reflect on this vision and to consider candidates who embody not just promises, but a genuine commitment to putting students first in every decision. Together, let's build a future for all, and let's put students first. Thank you.
Thank you. Justice in Action, you have 1 minute.
Thank you all for sitting around for the debates this evening. In closing, our platform represents a commitment to fostering student-centric environment through the Student Legal Fund Society. By prioritizing accountability, commitment, and transparency, we aim to establish a foundation built on integrity, accessibility, and fairness. We aim to invest in avenues that yield both stability and growth, while also aligning our banking partnerships with ethical standards. Moreover, our dedication to holding UBC accountable underscores our belief in advocating for student rights and ensuring transparency in university processes. Our commitment extends to being readily available and accessible to all students. By implementing regular office hours, accommodating diverse language needs, and providing support for students with disabilities, we strive to create an inclusive environment where every individual feels valued and supported. Transparency serves as the cornerstone of our platform, as we commit to reforming bylaws to ensure fair procedures and embedding accountability at every level of our organization. Thank you very much. Please consider voting for Justice in Action.
Great. Thank you all for coming, and that concludes our first debate. See you all on Thursday.